Part 59. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 596. For Isis, and even for most taboo places today, the value of Muzion is indescribable. His value is even higher than Dacian's national destiny. For the various ancient creatures in the Forbidden Land, national luck is certainly an extremely precious resource, but for Isis and other taboo masters, Muzion's priority is higher than national luck. It's just a pity that when they discovered that Muzion was a natural furnace, it was too late. At that time, Muzion was not only escorted by the Qing Emperor and the Master of the Sword Palace, but even the Forbidden Area was also a forbidden area to him. In this case, it was impossible to get close to Muzion, let alone bring him back to the forbidden place. But now there is this opportunity. The Dacian dynasty was approaching its end, and many people came here after hearing the news. Unexpectedly, even Muzion came. After hearing the maid's words, Isis couldn't help but chuckle. Originally, she was still thinking about how to catch Muzion. Now it's better, she doesn't need to think of a way, the other party will come to her door by herself. Although he had long heard that Muzion was a playboy and there were many Taoist monks around him, but how serious was it for him to walk on the street with a woman so openly? Who is the woman next to him? Do you recognize her? Isis suddenly asked casually. My subordinate is incompetent and did not realize the identity of that woman, she is very unfamiliar. I have never seen her before, the maid whispered. Oh. There was a bit of interest in Isis's eyes. Under the exotic skirt, she sat with a pair of sexy long legs crossed, her fingertips toying with a strand of fine hair, looking like this, they must have just gotten to know each other recently, a female nun. At first, she thought there was some ambush for the other party to show up so openly, but now it seems that she may have thought Muzion was a little too complicated. At this time, Isis suddenly felt that her thoughts were slightly interrupted, and her beautiful eyes glanced out the window inadvertently. The Lord of Eternity, why is he here to join in the fun? There was a bit of icy chill in those beautiful eyes. When it comes to competing for national fortunes, major taboo places can still be competed for on a fair basis. But when it comes to Muzion, there is no fair competition. It seems that if she wants to take this opportunity to take away the natural furnace cauldron this time, it will be much more difficult than she imagined. Isis slightly raised her arrogant chin, and a breathtaking smile soon appeared at the corner of her mouth. But it is precisely because of this that it proves the value of Muzion. Seeing this, not only her, but also other taboo lords have realized the importance of the natural furnace, which far exceeds the national destiny of Dacian. Just as Isis stood up and was about to leave, she suddenly seemed to notice something, and her eyes inadvertently glanced in a certain direction in the sky. The Lord of Eternity just sent a message to her, asking her to go there to meet him. It seems like I'm quite attractive. Not long after I left home, I was already being targeted by so many people. But that's true. After all, the Tian furnace cauldron is no longer a secret. At least many great masters in Kyushu already know about it, the Forbidden Land has already known my identity for a long time. Muzion and Miss Tiandeo were walking on the bustling streets of Dacian capital. Their eyes seemed to be casually scanning the surrounding shops along the way, and they were sighing secretly in their hearts. He himself could already detect that there were numerous G machines locked on him at the moment, not to mention that Miss Tiandeo on the side was still informing him and informed Muzion of the identities of several people who were currently secretly watching him. Master, are you sure this is really okay? Miss Tiandeo asked through a message, with a hint of caution in her tone, saying, if the Lord of Taboo takes action against you, I cannot help you directly due to the restrictions of the rules of heaven and earth. If I were you, I would send a message right now to ask the Qing Emperor or the Master of the Sword Palace to go to the Dacian dynasty to protect you, instead of going out on a date with the will of heaven in broad daylight. At this time, another cold voice sounded in Muzion's heart. That is another personality that is now assimilated with Miss Tiendeo, taboo. Are you worried that I will be captured by some taboo lord? But even if they capture me, they won't kill me directly, right? Musian asked with a smile, seeing the worry in Miss Tiendeo's heart. As for Yao Meng, even if I don't tell them to protect me, they are probably watching me somewhere now, Musian continued. There are only 4 taboo places that don't want to kill you. The other 5 taboo lords all want you dead. After all, your existence will do them no harm at all, the taboo replied coldly. Concubine Shangyan's deeds of suppressing the 9 taboo places left an indelible shadow in the hearts of the taboo lords. Just in the Hedeo realm, one can single-handedly suppress the 9 taboo lords, and seems to have endless longevity. At least every time the taboo land is born, they can always encounter the mysterious existence that suppressed them. How can people not be afraid of this? And you must know that there is already such a threat in the Hedeo realm. If that person becomes immortal and ascends with the help of the Tian Tian furnace in the future, won't the Forbidden Land be wiped out by that person? To put it another way, even if Musian and concubine Shangyan are not familiar with each other, the current Qing Emperor, Gong Lingyu, and even the Queen of the Demon Realm are enough to make people fearful. Because according to the understanding of the Forbidden Land, these 3 powerful Hedeo masters were able to become immortals in the end, and they all have an inseparable relationship with Musian. If in the future, because of Musian, the great powers in Kyushu gradually emerge and ascend, then I am afraid that the Forbidden Land will not be able to wait for the next birth. Before that, the forbidden areas must be eradicated. It is impossible for Musian not to understand this truth. Rather, he now knows exactly how much of a threat his existence poses to the Lords of Taboo. He smiled and said, "Don't worry, there are too many people here. Let's go outside the city to relax first. I've been almost bored to death in the palace these past few days. Or is it boring to date me, so you want to go back?" Musian stared at Miss Tiendeo's ice-like delicate face and asked again in a warm voice. "Taboo and I are just worried that the master will be attacked by people from the Forbidden Land and encounter something unexpected. I am very happy to go out with the master to relax," Miss Tiendeo said calmly. "Okay, since the master said so, let's go out and relax first." Seeing that she could not persuade Musian at all, Miss Tiendeo finally gave up the persuasion and chose to follow Musian silently, enjoying their date in the current chaos. Just as Musian was about to leave, he suddenly seemed to notice a rather familiar aura, and couldn't help but reveal an interesting smile. "Muji is here too. That would make it easier to dig this hole." While Musian was dating Miss Tiendeo outside the city to relax, at this moment in the sky, there was an extremely indifferent gaze looking down coldly at the young man on the ground. The Lord of Eternity stood with his hands behind his back, his mysterious robe rustling in the wind, looking down at the creatures on the ground. He seemed to be quite interested, looking at the young man on the ground who was taking a mysterious woman out of the city. As far as I know, Musian is not an idiot. It's not surprising that he would come to the Dakian dynasty, but he would date a woman in such an open and honest manner when troubled times are approaching, and he doesn't take us and others seriously at all. Here, that's not his usual style. It should be said that it is because the Qing Emperor and the Master of the Sword Palace are secretly protecting him, so Musian intends to lure us into taking the bait? Maybe the Queen of the Demon Realm is also secretly there. The voice of the Lord of Eternity, which seemed to be whispering to himself, fell exactly into the ears of several other forbidden lords vaguely visible above the sky. The existence of the Feathering Realm can rewrite taboo rules for one's own use within a certain range, and even rewrite time. This is already a method that is close to reaching the heavens. Even the taboo lords who have existed since the birth of Kyushu are now extremely afraid of it. But being afraid doesn't mean that you have to sit back and wait for death, watching Musian's power gradually expand but doing nothing. At least, now is the best time to take action in this crowded Dakian dynasty. The last time the 3 immortals in the Ascension realm felt this kind of pressure was in the world sea tens of thousands of years ago, Right, the Lord of Eternity said with a chuckle. In the past, the Forbidden Land has never been so active as during this period. Even when the Forbidden Land fell in the past when the dynasty was overthrown, the Forbidden Land drew on the fortunes of the country and did so in a low-key manner. However, this time, the owners of the 8 forbidden places have made some moves. This fact itself is incredible. I remember that time on the Sea of the World, the Lord of Samsara was cursed by the witch and was seriously injured. Is the Lord of Samsara still in the Forbidden Land of Samsara? The Lord of Eternity asked casually, but his eyes fell directly on the graceful figure vaguely emerging at the end of the sky. The owner of the Forbidden Land of Reincarnation in the Western region is also the second-generation Lord of Reincarnation. The Lord of Samsara smiled and said, "The former Lord of Samsara? Are you talking about the old guy who was completely frightened after the battle in the World Sea and lived in seclusion in the mountains and forests? After all, he is also your teacher. It is not the way for a disciple to treat his teacher like this." A gentle voice sounded not far from him. "The second owner of the ancient land of immortality, you die." The Lord of Samsara sneered, "You die, stop being so hypocritical here. You are as fake and compassionate as those bald donkeys in the western regions. You have been looking for the immortal Lord for so many years. Isn't it because he took away the immortal Lord before he left? Is it something forbidden in ancient times?" With a smile in her eyes, Isis said softly, "Okay, everyone, if you want to quarrel, you can set a time to have a good fight in the future. But right now, no matter you, me, or other taboo places, we all have one thing in common. Purpose. I know that some of you want to kill him, but that is my beloved man. If possible, I still hope that he can accompany me back to the immortal Forbidden Land and serve me well." Isis licked her red lips and said again with a charming voice, "But whether it is those who hope that Musian will die or those who hope to take him back to the forbidden place, I hope you will not forget that now we all there is a common purpose. Musian, we can no longer stay with Qing Emperor and others." Isis came to her final conclusion. Before that, the Forbidden Land was divided into 2 groups. One side hoped to kill Musian and avoid future troubles, while the other side hoped that Musian could surrender to his pomegranate skirt and provide himself with a steady stream of natural furnaces. Cauldron spiritual energy. The major taboo places have always been hostile to each other in the past, so naturally there was no possibility of any cooperation. However, now, they are facing a huge crisis. If Musian continues to cultivate in Jizhu, it is difficult to guarantee what changes will happen to his natural furnace when Musian achieves Dao in the future. 3 people have already appeared in the Yuhua realm because of Musian. If this continues, Jizhu in the future may no longer have a place for the Forbidden Land. Take Musian away first. As for his life or death, we will decide later. I think you have no objection, right? The master of the Forbidden Land of Order spoke softly, and his gentle eyes looked around at the several taboo masters above the sky. She was wearing a black and white dress made of silver silk, which perfectly wrapped her graceful figure. She was wearing a pair of exquisite short boots on her feet. It seemed that there was a soft light lingering under her feet. As she walked in the void, she inadvertently revealed her slender legs wrapped in white silk. "Lord of Order, it seems that you have gone to other places to be civilized again." At this time, a clear and pleasant voice sounded, and the seemingly harmless little girl was blinking her eyes and looking at the Lord of Order, with a naive look in her eyes. It was Muji, the Lord of Life who had just come to the Dogon dynasty not long ago, and the only inside ghost in the 8 forbidden places this time. Early before the 8 lords of taboos gathered, Muji had already informed Musian of the idea of the forbidden place, but Musian asked her to wait and see. "Although I don't know what the big brother is up to, but since he said so, Muji will naturally stay here to play with them. Jizhu is so big, and there are so many civilizations. Now that you and I are afraid of that mysterious strong man and dare not come out, then in order to kill time, using a wisp of spiritual consciousness to see the characteristics of civilizations in other places is not a kind of entertainment. The Lord of Order smiled calmly, but you can rest assured. In order to avoid alarming that person, I have never descended to Juzhu in my true body. The Forbidden Land of Order has a very different and special feature compared to other forbidden places, that is, the ownerless land where the will of heaven is sleeping is in the Forbidden Land of Order. I don't know if it is because of this reason or what, every time the Lord of Order intends to descend in his true body, he will always awaken the will of heaven in the ownerless land, and after that, the mysterious strong man who suppressed the 9 forbidden lands will always wake up at that time. The Lord of Eternity looked around at the taboo masters. King Di, Gong Lianyu, maybe the queen of the demon world? Does Muzian really think that the 3 Yuhua realm can protect him forever? That's why he is so openly hanging out with a person of the opposite sex at this critical moment. Or does he think that his identity as a disciple of Lianji sect will make us afraid? The Lianji sect is indeed prominent in Juzhu, but for the ancient taboo masters, there is no one in the world who can make them truly submit except the way of heaven. Even the supreme strong man who once suppressed the 9 taboo places, they are not very convinced, although they have been suppressed many times, the other party cannot completely wipe them out from this world. In the final analysis, the other party's strength should be on par with them, but her Taoism is ever-changing and too complicated, so it is difficult to deal with. According to the original agreement, if Muzian really secretly asks King Di and others to protect him, you should stop him and I will take Muzian away. The Eternal Lord said slowly, I have promised the great Dao before that I will not deal with Muzian immediately after catching him. I will wait until everyone is gathered before making a decision together. You should have no objection to this, right? Muji glanced at the tall man with dark eyes and said casually, then how should the things in the Dogon dynasty be handled? You should have secretly contacted the royal family of Dogon these days and instigated them to rebel, right? When Dogon is destroyed, what will happen to the country's destiny? How to divide it? Isis said with a smile, the fate of the country depends on each person's ability. Anyway, the Dogon dynasty must be destroyed this time. Only in this way can the heavenly Dao descend on Juzhu and give us more permissions. I can feel that the power of the heavenly Dao is much stronger than before. I think it is about to completely restore its former supreme glory. She looked around at everyone and smiled, since everyone has no objection, let's catch Muzian first. Muzian's strength is not as simple as it seems. There is a possibility of failure if you attack him directly. If possible, you can start with the woman next to him, Muji suddenly said. After this, several taboo masters were stunned for a moment, and Isis narrowed her beautiful eyes and said, are you sure that catching the woman next to Muzian will make him surrender? Muji said lightly, Muzian is very sentimental, so if you catch that woman, Muzian will definitely surrender. You have seen the fighting power of Muzian when the Green Emperor ascended to heaven. If you attack him directly, who can guarantee that he can exert strength that does not belong to his own realm? After this, the voices above the sky were slightly silent. After a while, the Lord of Eternity chuckled, the Lord of Life is right. In this case, let's start with the woman next to him. The Lord of Eternity slowly stretched out his palm, and a withered leaf quietly appeared in his palm. The taboo of the eternal forbidden land, the red dust leaf. The user needs to pay 1/3 of his lifespan, and as a price, the red dust leaf can encompass everything, and no one in this world can break free from the shackles of the red dust leaf. Although the price seems heavy, the lifespan of the Lord of Taboo is infinite, because they are blessed by the heavenly Dao. Therefore, this red dust leaf can naturally exert its greatest power in the hands of the Eternal Lord. One leaf is the red dust. Even if the real body of the Eternal Lord is not here, just using this taboo object can already take away the woman who follows Muzian. She can only blame her bad luck for finding Muzian as a Taoist partner. In the afternoon, outside the city, Muzian sat under a big tree, squinting his eyes, watching the stars and shadows falling, holding Miss Tiandeo's hand in one hand, enjoying this leisurely time. Suddenly, his back was slightly cold, and an inexplicable chill drilled out from the bottom of his heart bit by bit. It seems that the Lord of Taboos finally couldn't help but take action. Musian smiled and turned his head to look at Miss Tiandeo, who was sitting on the lawn with one leg on one side in a plain dress. She leaned on Musian's shoulder and looked obedient. There was a hazy veil on her face. Under the veil, her exquisite face seemed to have been carefully carved by God, and her beautiful eyes were particularly quiet. Her figure was also a perfect golden ratio, and there was not even a flaw on her body. She was beautiful, but she felt cold as ice. "Will you blame me?" Musian suddenly asked. "For me, it was the master who gave me a second life, so I will obey any order from the master." Miss Tiandeo stared at Musian calmly and said, "Even if the enemy is a taboo land, it is no exception." Miss Tiandeo tilted her head and continued, "But master, are you sure they will find me first instead of targeting you? Although you are powerful, you don't understand people's hearts, especially the Lord of Taboos." Musian smiled. "The strength of the taboo masters is indeed very strong. If they are blessed by the taboo rules, they can even barely tie with the Yahua realm, not to mention the blessing of the taboo objects. But, after being suppressed by Shang Yanfei for countless years, those taboo masters have not appeared in the world for a long time and have been too cautious. If it was before meeting Muji, Musian felt that he might not be able to catch fish. But now that Muji is giving advice to several taboo masters, he doesn't need to do anything at all, just wait for Muji's impromptu performance." Miss Tiandeo still has doubts and is about to speak. At this time, a gentle voice suddenly sounded slowly in the ears of the two. "Friend Mudeo is really leisurely and elegant. He actually has time to meet a girl to relax when the chaos is coming." In the soft light, a tall man descended from the sky. His aura almost locked Musian at that moment, playing with the leaf in his hand. The sudden sound made Musian's eyes widen suddenly, staring at the man in front of him. "Lord of Taboo. Don't pretend, Yahua Realm Human Emperor, even if you are anywhere in Jizhu, they can always lock your existence. You brought a woman out for a tryst today, isn't it just to lure us in?" The Lord of Eternity smiled lightly, "But I'm afraid you underestimate the unity of the Forbidden Land." Musian's face finally changed a little. "You have joined forces." The Lord of Eternity did not comment. "You should be glad for this. Apart from you, the only person who could let us join forces in the past was that person. After the Green Emperor noticed that we took action, he would probably come to rescue you with the other two Yahua realm." The Lord of Eternity's face suddenly turned cold, "But before that, you will fall into my hands first." He stretched out his hand suddenly and threw the red dust leaf out. The seemingly ordinary taboo object seemed to have infinite suction at that moment and swept towards Musian. However, at this time, a clear light lit up, and it actually forcibly isolated the power of the red dust leaf. The Lord of Eternity looked at the measuring ruler floating beside Musian with a little surprise, and praised, "The Lord of Life is right, you are indeed difficult to deal with." The measuring ruler turned into a light shield that enveloped him and Miss Tiandeo beside him. Musian smiled and said, "Should I thank the Lord of Taboo for his praise?" "Thank you, but you don't have to." The Lord of Eternity narrowed his eyes, suddenly made a gesture with his hands, raised his hand and waved it, and the power of the red dust leaf suddenly converged, and then turned into a residual image, rushing towards the woman beside Musian. Musian's pupils suddenly shrank, and he was about to stop it. "Little friend Mew, don't be distracted when fighting." A woman's gentle words suddenly rang in his ears. Musian turned his head and saw a beautiful woman next to him. "Lord of Order, you can just call me that," the woman said with a smile, raising her hand to grab Miss Tiandeo. Musian's face changed slightly. "Don't touch her." However, when he stepped forward, it was too late. He could only watch the Lord of Order grab Miss Tiendeo's shoulders and then take her away from Musian. Seeing that the woman next to him did not resist, the Lord of Order looked at her for a few more times with his beautiful eyes, and then he breathed a sigh of relief. At first she thought Musian was plotting to kill them, but now it seems, his biggest reliance seems to be the Green Emperor and the Sword Palace Master. Shizixuan is far away in the demon world, and it is impossible for her to arrive in Dongzhou at the first time, unless she is by Musian's side from the beginning. So the Lord of Order initially suspected that the woman next to Musian was the queen of the demon world. But now, this woman is wearing a veil that can cover her true face. I thought she was the queen of the demon world. Although the other person's aura is a bit strange, it is certain that the woman in front of her does not have any demonic aura. Then things will be easy to handle. As long as Musian can surrender to her, she can accept this great national destiny even if she doesn't have it. The Lord of Order showed a charming smile on his face, glanced at Musian, whose face was full of anger, and then reached out and casually lifted the mysterious veil of the woman she held hostage. What came into view was a breathtakingly beautiful face. Her hair was loose, and her beautiful eyes were crystal clear. Her beauty and skin were so delicate that she could receive all the praises in the world. Even the Lord of Eternity, who was suppressing Musian, couldn't help but look at her a few more times. Then the Lord of Eternity quickly reacted, looking at the Lord of Order who seemed a little dazed, frowned, and said, "Order, what are you waiting for? If you delay any further, King Di and others may notice it. Once King Di and the Lord of Sword Palace come, it won't be so easy to take Musian away." "I know," the Lord of Order said, but still stared at this beautiful woman with some doubt. For some reason, she always felt that this woman looked familiar. At this time, the Lord of Order and the Lord of Eternity suddenly heard a cold and emotionless voice, "You violated the rules of heaven and earth, attacked the will of heaven, and will be punished by 9 generations of heavenly tribulation." The Lord of Eternity had countless goosebumps on his back, as if he had thought of something, his pupils shrank slightly, and he suddenly raised his head to look at the woman in front of him. Behind her, a sacred sun was rising slowly. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 597. At this moment, it was as bright as day. Behind the woman, the sun was sacred and blazing, as if it was inviolable. Heavenly will. The Lord of Eternity almost cried out, his face full of astonishment, as if he could not believe that the will of heaven would actually transform into his true body, and that he had walked with Musian not long ago. The Lord of Order's beautiful face was also full of disbelief, and he turned his astonished eyes to Musian. In the 9 provinces where heavenly will is not obvious, the will differentiated from heavenly will can be said to be the god of 9 provinces. At least, for the taboo lords who are not afraid of any creature in 9 provinces, the only thing that can make them afraid in 9 provinces is the will of heaven. Because the taboo in the will of heaven controls the rules of the forbidden land. If they really want to fight, there is no suspense at all. But how did Musian cheat the will of heaven to come to his side, and even go out on a date with her not long ago? The Lord of Order's beautiful eyes flickered slightly, and he looked at the condescending heavenly will with doubt and amazement. The fairy gold armor on her body silently enveloped her body at this moment, and her long curly hair fluttered with the spiritual energy she exuded. This woman is definitely the will of heaven. The Lord of Eternity also felt a chill in his heart, realizing that he had been locked by the aura of the will of heaven. Even though he had seen all kinds of big scenes in the past, he still had the idea of retreating at this moment. Although he didn't know how Musian convinced the will of heaven, he was only a clone now. If he fought with the will of heaven, he would definitely lose without a doubt if the taboo rules could not be used. It didn't matter if the clone died, but he still carried the taboo item with him. If Musian got the taboo item, then the future eternal ancient land might be slightly inferior to other taboo lands. The Lord of Eternity was in doubt and stared at Musian. "Musian, What method did you use to confuse the will of heaven? The will of heaven has always been a fair and just supreme existence. How could it stand on the side of Musian? He must have used some means to blind the eyes of the will of heaven. If heaven finds out, you will die 10,000 times and it will not be a pity. The Lord of Eternity had a bit of coldness in his eyes, but he had already begun to retreat. If Musian was still the prey of the Lord of Taboo just now, then with the appearance of the will of heaven, the positions of hunter and prey have been exchanged. Musian showed a gentle smile on his face and whispered, "Do you think you still have a chance to report this to heaven? I always feel that this is not what a decent person said, but what a villain said." Musian couldn't help but complain in his heart. When he thought of this, Musian felt a little complicated. Logically speaking, he should have gotten rid of his fate as a stepping stone and is no longer a villain. However, whether it is a habit left over from the past or not, sometimes Musian still behaves like a villain. At least now he usually says things that a villain would say. But it doesn't matter. Anyway, in this world, whether to be a villain or not is decided by the way of heaven. If the way of heaven thinks he is a villain, then just treat him as a villain. Then, now we should do something more in line with the villain. Kill them all. Remember to erase their memories as well, don't let their original bodies notice it, Musian said softly. If possible, leave the forbidden things behind, he added again. As soon as the voice fell, the faces of the Lord of Eternity and the Lord of Order changed drastically, a little frightened, and almost at the same time, they suddenly scattered to both sides and fled. The will of heaven raised his hand, and the fairy gold armor made the woman's figure more sacred and awe-inspiring. The world seemed to dim at this moment, and the lead-colored cloud slowly moved from afar. Boom! The terrifying sense of oppression permeated the entire sky at this moment, and the lightning flashed in the clouds, and even Musian was shocked. He now had a psychological shadow just by seeing this heavenly tribulation. After all, he was struck by the 9-life heavenly tribulation too many times in the restricted area last time, and was beaten several times by the heavenly tribulation transformed by his wives. The Lord of Eternity stretched out his palm, and a fiery red light lit up. He pinched the formula to sacrifice the red dust leaf in his hand, and a ripple rippled, and then, the majestic world seemed to descend at this moment. It seemed to be all-encompassing, wanting to swallow up the entire heavenly tribulation. A leaf of red dust can cover the sky. Even the Lord of Eternity himself is not clear about the origin of this taboo, but at least it is certain that in the same realm, taboo objects are invincible. However, at this moment, a ray of light seemed to break through the sky and block the red dust leaf. The soft light was emitted by a ruler only the size of a palm, but the ruler seemed to have its own spiritual wisdom, able to suppress everything in the world, and resisted the attack of the red dust leaf. The Lord of Eternity's face changed, and he stretched out his hand suddenly, as if he wanted to call the red dust leaf back to his side. A ray of light in the ruler of the sky turned into a light shield to wrap the red dust leaf in it. No matter how the Lord of Eternity called, the red dust leaf, who used to regard him as the master, refused to return, but floated towards Musian. The Lord of Eternity's face changed slightly. "Musian, you dare dash." Boom! Before he finished speaking, a lightning bolt struck from the calamity cloud, and in the next moment it turned into the figure of an ancient mighty being, who immediately rushed towards the Lord of Eternity. Musian played with the seemingly broken leaf in his hand and smiled. "Daiu, this thing is destined to be with me, so I'll accept it with pleasure. It's a pity that the Lord of Order didn't seem to carry a taboo item with him, otherwise he might have taken this opportunity to seize the second taboo item." Looking at the Lord of Order, who was also receiving the just punishment, Musian couldn't help but feel a little regretful. He sat alone in the shade of the tree before, enjoying the coolness leisurely, and his eyes were looking at the faint green and white lights emerging from the distant sky. It seems that Yao Meng and Ruoxi really know about my attack. Could they have any means to spy on me remotely? Musian thought strangely in his heart. When he thought that everything he did might be in the live broadcast, His expression was a little tense. But forget it, instead of thinking about it here, it is better to wait for Miss Tiendeo to deal with things here, and then go and see for yourself. Looking at the two taboo masters who were constantly attacked under the heavenly tribulation, Musian narrowed his eyes and thought about such things leisurely in his heart. Kingdi, you are really inseparable from Musian. Are you secretly paying attention to him even when he went to the Dogon dynasty to relax? On the other side, above the sky, Isis's beautiful eyes looked at the fairy in the green skirt in front of her with tenderness. She seemed careless, but in fact, she was already anxious in her heart. Although they agreed with other taboo masters that they would delay Kingdi and others, and the other two would be responsible for catching Musian. However, it has been nearly half an hour since just now. It stands to reason that it would take so long to catch Musian? What's more, the Eternal Lord also brought his taboo things this time. But it has been a full half hour since they delayed the steps of Kingdi and Gong Lianyu, but they still haven't received any news from there. The two taboo masters who went to capture Musian not long ago had sworn an oath, and it was impossible for them to break their oath, let alone take Musian away directly. In other words, did something unexpected happen to them? Rather than wanting to defeat us and leave, you are stalling for time. Are you waiting for good news from the Lord of Eternity and the Lord of Order? At this moment, a cold and calm voice suddenly sounded, and also brought Isis and the other three taboo masters back to reality. Gong Lianyu's eyes swept over Isis and others, and said in a calm tone, "If you are waiting for them, I think you can give up now." She has not been with Musian these days because she knows that the will of the heavenly Deo has always been with Musian. And as long as Musian is attacked, she can detect it even if she is far away in the Sword Palace, unless Musian is not within the scope of Jizhu. It was just that in order to avoid disturbing Musian's plan, Gong Lianyu stayed in the Sword Palace. After all, Gong Lianyu had seen Musian's thoughts in the past, and knew that he was digging a hole and waiting for some uncontrollable taboo masters to jump in. Isis said quietly, "It seems that although the palace master is far away in the Sword Palace, he is still very concerned about his Taoist partner." Although it seemed calm on the surface, Isis's heart had already set off a storm. How could it be possible? Although the Lord of Eternity is only a clone, he has the blessing of the red dust leaf, and his combat power is no less than that of the Hideo. In addition, he also has the help of the Lord of Order. How could he not even catch Musian? What should I do? Should I evacuate now? But if I leave now, wouldn't it be equivalent to giving up the national destiny of the Dogon dynasty? Seeing that Isis's face seemed a little gloomy, Yao Meng opened her red lips and smiled. "You don't think that with just a few clones present, plus 2 or 3 taboo items, you can take my husband away, right?" Even if it was her, it was not realistic to take Musian away directly, let alone a few people who were not even the real body of the taboo master. Of course, if Yao Meng wanted, she could actually take Musian away when she ascended to heaven. It's just that she is a sister of the Qing Emperor who knows how to care for people. Because she took care of Musian's feelings, she didn't kill all the fish in the fish pond. Otherwise, she could have strangled a few small fish before they matured. There wouldn't be so much trouble. For example, this beautiful snake who has always wanted to snatch people from her and even wanted to announce her marriage to the 9 states. Yao Meng raised her eyes nonchalantly and said softly, "How long do you plan to hide there?" Buzz. The light was diffused, and there was a violent fluctuation in the space. Soon, a bottomless passage appeared under the sky. Then, a voice full of danger came, as if spitting out a snake's tongue. "You can solve this problem by yourselves, so I didn't plan to join in the fun at the beginning." A sweet voice that seemed to be able to bewitch all living beings sounded. "The Queen of the Demon Realm." Isis blurted out almost subconsciously, staring at the woman in front of her who looked extremely beautiful but extremely dangerous. When enemies meet, they are particularly jealous. At this moment, seeing this enchanting beauty appear in front of her, Isis could hardly suppress the murderous intent in her heart. Gong Lianyu sneered and said, "You noticed it just when he was in danger. You didn't have nothing to do except spying on him every day in the demon world." The queen of the demon world raised her eyebrows slightly, opened her red lips, and replied lightly, "The news of the fall of the Dogon dynasty has long been spread. I naturally knew that he would come to join in the fun, so I set off in advance. But how could the palace master think of using magic to spy on him?" The queen of the demon world paused slightly and smiled charmingly. "Could it be that the palace master is a stalker every day, secretly spying on what my husband is doing? Obviously possessing the strongest and most violent power in the world, but at this moment, they are fighting openly and secretly in words." This scene made several taboo masters, including Muji, who was observing from the side from beginning to end, speechless. There was a chill in Isis's eyes, and she said in a cold voice, "Queen of the demon realm, I don't intend to bother with you about the last incident, but you have been against me again and again. Do you really think that the immortal Forbidden Land dare not go to war with your demon world? She is the taboo master of the immortal Forbidden Land. She has seen many dynasties change and many great powers fall. A cultivator who has only practiced for less than 10,000 years now dares to provoke her again and again, and even ignores her. For Isis, this is simply a great insult." The queen of the demon realm glanced slightly to the side, and her soft eyes seemed to be charming. The next moment, she raised her hand. Isis subconsciously blocked her face, but what came towards her was an extremely thick snake tail. Bang! With a loud sound, a wisp of spiritual consciousness differentiated by a great power was crushed into powder so easily. "Didn't you see I was talking to someone else? If you really want revenge, let the real body come next time." The faces of the remaining two taboo masters present changed subtly. This demon queen is really a ruthless person. If she offended Isis last time because she couldn't bear it anymore, then this time she simply wiped out Isis's clone in front of everyone. This is really going to offend the immortal Forbidden Land to death. As if she had done something very ordinary, the demon queen said delicately, "You can deal with the remaining two taboo masters by yourselves. I'm going to see how my husband is doing. If nothing unexpected happens, after dealing with the affairs of the Dogon dynasty, he should be free next time, right? Then it should be no problem for him to go to the demon world with me after that dash. Have you ever thought about why he wants to save the Dogon dynasty?" However, at this moment, an abrupt voice interrupted the demon queen's words. The woman's voice was not loud, but it seemed to cover all the voices at this time, making the atmosphere quiet. "Lord of Samsara." The queen of the demon realm glanced away lightly and said lightly, "If you have something to say, just say it. Riddle man, get out of here." This was taught by Musian. The Lord of Samsara was obviously very angry, but he still sneered and said indifferently, "Saving the Dogon dynasty is also saving those of you who claim to have escaped the rules of heaven and earth. When the dynasty is overthrown, the way of heaven will come, and it will settle accounts with all those who violate the rules of heaven and earth. It is not just the Dogon dynasty that is about to be doomed." The Lord of Samsara's words were quite meaningful, but his eyes were still indifferent, staring at the scarlet and charming eyes of the queen of the demon realm. "But do you really think that as long as the Dogon dynasty is not destroyed, the way of heaven will not come? From the time when Dogon was sentenced to the end of its luck, fate has already destined that the way of heaven will come. No matter how hard you try, the established future will not be rewritten. The way of heaven. It symbolizes power and supreme authority. In Juzhu, it is the high God and the gathering of all living things. To resist the heavenly Dao is to fight against God." As the Lord of Samsara said this, the atmosphere seemed to freeze to the freezing point at that moment, and there was silence. There was a hint of danger in the eyes of the queen of the demon realm. "What do you want to say?" The Lord of Samsara sneered, "I just want you to meet the heavenly Dao together." She raised her hand and pointed to the air. It was sunny just a moment ago, but as the Lord of Samsara finished speaking, the whole sky seemed to have entered the night, dark and gloomy. Yao Meng seemed to realize something and said, "She is casting a spell to awaken the heavenly Dao. We have to stop her. It's too late." The Lord of Samsara had a faint smile on his lips. Every time the fate of a dynasty is about to come, the heavenly Dao will wake up, and then wait for the moment when the dynasty will fall to descend on Juzhu. Although the Dogon dynasty has not yet collapsed, she has already sent the message of the dynasty's collapse to the heavenly Dao. Next, just wait for the heavenly Dao to come. Ren Qingdi and others are in the Yahua realm, breaking free from the shackles of the rules of heaven and earth, but when facing the heavenly Dao, they are still just ants. As long as they are still living beings on the earth, they will never be able to defeat the heavenly Dao. Because the heavenly Dao is the gathering of all living things, and its existence itself represents all things in the world. Less than a few seconds after casting the spell, the Lord of Samsara knelt on one knee, quietly waiting for the coming of the heavenly Dao. The queen of the demon realm narrowed her eyes, raised her hand to summon the earthly python, and rolled towards the chairman of the Samsara chairman. Clang! However, at this time, a soft white light lit up behind the Lord of Samsara, blocking the attack, and even dissolving the attack of the bronze ancient sword sacrificed by Gong Lianyu. The soft white light was sacred and charming, but at the moment of its arrival, it was filled with extremely terrifying pressure, causing all the cultivators in the capital to kneel on the ground involuntarily. This is a sign of the arrival of the heavenly Dao. Sensing the three dazzling eyes behind him, the Lord of Samsara showed a hint of mockery in his eyes. It is too late to regret now. It happened that after the heavenly Dao descended this time, the human emperor of the feathered realm was swept away. In this way, the status of the forbidden land in Juzhu will still be unshakable. Although every time the heavenly Dao descended, the forbidden land had to pay something, and even Musian, who affected the rules and order, would die at that time. It would be a pity if Tiansheng Looting died. But now there is no time to care about so much. After all, there are already 3 feathered realms in Juzhu now. If it continues to develop like this, I am afraid that there will be no place for the forbidden land in the future. Compared with this, the price paid for asking the heavenly Dao to descend is nothing at all. Where is the heavenly Dao? However, after nearly a quarter of an hour, the smile on the face of the Lord of Samsara finally faded a little. Something is wrong. In the past, it would not take a quarter of an hour for the heavenly Dao to descend on Juzhu. But now, let alone the shadow of the heavenly Dao, she could not even feel the breath of the heavenly Dao. As the supreme ruler of the forbidden land, the Lord of Samsara had seen the heavenly Dao descend more than once in the past. She knew that there would be signs before the heavenly Dao descended, such as a soft white light. The white light did appear just now, but now it disappeared again. The Lord of Samsara's thoughts suddenly stopped for a moment, as if she had noticed something. She suddenly raised her head and looked around, and vaguely noticed something strange. She could not even feel the breath of any living creature outside the Dogon dynasty. It was not that the heavenly Dao did not want to descend, but that the secret of the heavenly Dao was blocked by someone. The heavenly Dao did not know that the fate of the Dogon dynasty was coming, nor did it know the information she had just passed on. How could it be possible? Someone has deceived the heavens and deceived the heavens. At this moment, the eyes of the Lord of Samsara were full of doubts. She spread her spiritual consciousness outside the Dogon dynasty, and then, as if she had caught a breath, she looked up in a certain direction along that breath. At this moment, her eyes seemed to pass through the mountains and fell on the woman in black clothes sitting quietly under the pavilion. Boom! As if a lightning flashed in her mind, the Lord of Samsara's pupils suddenly shrank. She blocked the secrets of heaven. Shang. The Lord of Samsara subconsciously wanted to call out the woman's name, but she saw the woman slightly raised her snow-white and arrogant chin and put her fingertips in front of her red lips. Hush! Let me tell you, because it is all manual review now, the updates in the middle of the night are basically not released, so this period will be changed to daytime updates, just in time to adjust the work and rest. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 598. Under the sky, you can hear a pin drop. The originally arrogant and indifferent face of the Lord of Reincarnation showed a look of astonishment and even disbelief. As a collection of all living things, the combat power of Tiandeo far exceeds people's imagination. Even the Lord of the Taboo, who controls the taboo rules, is in awe of the Tao from the bottom of his heart. After all, their birth is the result of the gestation of the Tao. Because of this, even if they saw someone in Kyushu emerging and ascending in the past, they only felt a sense of crisis, but not to the point of being in a state of chaos. In her opinion, the so-called ascension realm, breaking away from the shackles of heaven and earth, is simply insignificant to the superior heavenly Deo. But now, the secret of heaven has been blocked by others, and the way of heaven cannot come. Concubine Shang Yan. The Lord of Reincarnation whispered the name, and her body stiffened slightly, as if she was stunned. It's not that she doesn't know the leader of the Lianji sect, it's rather the opposite. Compared to other powerful men in Kyushu, the leader of the Lianji sect is the person she has interacted with the most. Every time the Dongzhou dynasty fell in the past, there was always a woman who witnessed it all. It's just that the Lord of Reincarnation has never seen this woman intervene in any dispute, and even when the dynasty fell, he always looked on with a cold eye. But this time, the Lord of Samsara looked through Qianzhou Mountain, as if directly to a certain peak of the Lianji sect, staring closely at those pale golden eyes. Majestic, ancient, and quiet, eyes that seemed to be free from any impurities. The road to immortality has appeared 3 times. With sect leader Shang's ability, it shouldn't be difficult to ascend to heaven, right? What is your purpose in staying in Kyushu? I have no interest in becoming an immortal. I just like to see the world in the mortal world, appreciate the vicissitudes of life, and the changes in dynasties. Watching the dynasty collapse and the destiny of Dongzhou that gave birth to you weaken, won't the sect master feel uncomfortable? Won't. Sect master, can you dare to swear? No need to swear. I, like you, hope that the dynasty will change again, but I am not interested in the fate of the country either, so rest assured. Sect leader Shang is really interesting. He does not want to become an immortal, nor does he care about the destiny of the country, nor does he intend to surrender to the way of heaven. So what does sect leader Shang really want? To become an immortal and ascend? Or to become the god of Kyushu and replace the way of heaven? I don't want anything. There was a hint of smile in her pale golden eyes. She was sitting in the snow-covered courtyard, her black attire fluttering in the cold winter wind, and she was quietly watching the 9 people who symbolized the forbidden place. Ancient Supreme. Heavy snowflakes fell all over the sky with the cold wind, turning the whole world into a silvery land. The peach blossom trees in the courtyard were piled with snowflakes. As a gust of wind blew by, the snow overpowered the branches and fell to the ground. She stared quietly in the direction of Tianqian City and said softly, I just hope time will pass quickly. Suddenly, the Lord of Reincarnation came back to her senses from her past memories. She raised her head and stared at concubine Shang Yan, saying, You never intervened in every dynasty's downfall in the past. Why do you want to stop us this time? In the past, several taboo masters had suspected that concubine Shang Yan had other motives, but later this suspicion was dispelled as the dynasty was destroyed again and again. She never ascended when the road to becoming an immortal came, and she never fought for the destiny of the country after the fall of the dynasty. Even when the way of heaven came to Kyushu several times in the past, She did not show any expression, just as concubine Shangyan herself said, she was just innocent be an observer while looking at the various situations in the world. At that time, her teacher, the previous Lord of Reincarnation, had speculated that concubine Shangyan might be the mysterious powerful person who repeatedly suppressed the taboo places and prevented them from spreading the taboo rules. But later it was confirmed that the aura exuding from concubine Shangyan was completely different from that of the mysterious strong man. I just don't want the referee to come in midway. Concubine Shangyan slowly picked up the hot tea on the table, blew gently, and said as if talking to herself, when the dynasty fell in the past, when did you wake up the law of heaven midway? This is against the rules. The Lord of Samsara raised his eyebrows slightly. Rule? This woman actually negotiates the rules of a forbidden place? As the first taboo place born in Kyushu, they also controlled the entire Kyushu in the past. Do you still need to negotiate rules with others? After all, even the rules are made by heaven, so why do they need to abide by them? The so-called rules are just shackles used to restrain all living things. But these taboo gods never have to follow the rules. What exactly does she want? The Lord of Samsara stared closely at concubine Shangyan's beautiful pale golden eyes, thoughts flashing in his mind like fleeting glimpses. Have you finished talking to that woman? If you haven't finished talking, how about I send you to chat with her slowly? The sweet laughter like silver bells echoed throughout the world, with a kind of charm that bewitched all living beings. The queen of the demon realm walked through the void step by step. Every step she took seemed to be accompanied by ripples in the space. The crimson in the corner of her eyes added a bit of charm. Beside her, a beautiful and dangerous earthly python surrounded her silently. Her slender fingertips gently caressed the earthly python, and then said softly, "Kill him directly without leaving anyone alive." Remember to erase her memory together. If the spiritual consciousness of the clone is erased, the main body will not know what the clone has experienced. Of course, this method of erasing memory cannot completely erase it. I can still recall part of the memory. The Lord of Reincarnation's eyes darkened a bit, and he said coldly, "You will regret it." Offending the immortal Forbidden Land and the Reincarnation Forbidden Land at the same time, no matter how strong the demon realm is now, does it really think it can withstand the wrath of the two taboo places at the same time? The queen of the demon realm said casually, "Actually, if possible, I don't want to offend the Forbidden Land. It's too late to give in now." The Lord of Reincarnation sneered, but he saw the queen of the demon realm's face suddenly turned cold. "But what can I do if I'm really offended?" The python of the world opened its bloody mouth, trying to swallow the Lord of Samsara directly into its belly. The queen of the demon realm never cares about offending others. From the moment the Forbidden Land targeted Musean, the two sides had been in a fight to the death. The Lord of Samsara did not make any move, he just stared closely at the charming eyes of the queen of the demon realm, and then watched helplessly as the python of the world swallowed her into it. The whole space seemed to be distorted. However, the queen of the demon realm did not relax, but inadvertently narrowed her eyes as if she had noticed something. Time goes back. The Lord of Samsara, who had just been swallowed into the abdomen by the python of the world, reappeared in front of her as if nothing had happened. A polyhedral crystal cube appeared in her palm at some point, with a charming halo shining on the cube. "Is reincarnation a taboo thing?" the queen of the demon realm whispered to herself. It seems that the Lord of Samsara must have used this forbidden object to set himself up to the point where as long as the queen of the demon realm attacks the Lord of Samsara, everything will start again. "If I really don't want to die, none of you can let my clone die." The Lord of Reincarnation smiled slightly. She just used the forbidden item of reincarnation in advance and directly changed her own death. Although the death of a clone would be possible, what's more important now is that she needs to pass this memory to her own body without reservation. The leader of Lianji sect is not neutral. Concubine Shangyan is also on Musean's side. Yao Meng inadvertently squinted his eyes and stared at the forbidden room of reincarnation. This thing is really tricky. With it, even if the Lord of Reincarnation's cauldron is sealed, it will be useless. Since none of the three of you have any plans to take action, I'll take my leave now, okay? When the Lord of Samsara saw this, he turned around decisively and turned into light and shadow to leave. However, the moment she turned around, the Lord of Samsara's body suddenly stiffened slightly. Then, as if she was under some kind of control, she subconsciously raised her hand and unlocked the blessing of the forbidden object of reincarnation. No, it wasn't that she was untied, but that she was being controlled. The Lord of Reincarnation seemed to have noticed something. His face was terrifyingly gloomy, and he suddenly turned his head to look at the little silver-haired girl who had been watching the show. Muji, whose side are you on? Muji played with the black notebook in her hand, raised her crystal-clear red eyes, which seemed to reveal innocence and ignorance of the world, and smiled slightly. Sister, don't be angry, I am doing this for your own good. Even if there are forbidden things, you will not be able to leave the Dakian dynasty safely. If you stay here for so long, don't you think your home will be gone when you go back? The Lord of Reincarnation was stunned for a moment, obviously failing to understand what Muji meant. Your true body is sleeping now, right? Muji tilted her head slightly and said again, would you like to feel what is happening in the forbidden land of Samsara now? The Lord of Reincarnation closed her eyes in disbelief, and then suddenly opened her eyes. Her eyes changed for the first time, and she stared in the direction of the western region. She could sense that her teacher was back. And, he even brought a strange woman back with him. Do you understand now? Only if you die can you quickly deal with the first-generation Lord of Reincarnation. They are all doing it for the best of my eldest sister. Muji, who was wearing a black dress, seemed to be leaning in the void, playing with a strand of hair carelessly, and the forbidden life object in her hand was suspended in front of her. She glanced at the Lord of Reincarnation inadvertently, then picked up the pen again and wrote a sentence in the notebook. Muji, you and I are both in a forbidden place, but you actually chose to stand on the opposite side of heaven, you will regret it. The Lord of Reincarnation's face darkened. Even a fool now knew that Muji was acting from beginning to end. She had been on Muzian's side from the beginning. Muji's idea at first was for them to attack the woman next to Muzian, and she was also digging a hole for them to jump into. Even the Lord of the Taboo could not have imagined that the Lord of Life, who was in the same taboo place as them, would turn against him and even become Muzian's man. But now I realized it was too late. Puff! A blood flower burst out from the chest of the Lord of Reincarnation, beautiful and coquettish, and the forbidden object in his hand fell off. Muji stretched out her hand and firmly caught the polygonal square forbidden object of reincarnation. Who are you trying to scare with so much nonsense, she muttered to herself as if muttering, and then put the forbidden items of reincarnation into the ring. You must be wondering why I would help him, right? The previously gloomy clouds in the sky were gradually dissipating. After watching the clone of the Lord of Reincarnation disappear, Muji quickly noticed the gazes of the Queen of the Demon Realm and others not far away, so she looked at them with a smile. I have no interest in your affairs, the Queen of the Demon Realm said calmly. In the view of the Queen of the Demon Realm, the Lord of Life's help to Muzian is nothing more than receiving some benefits from Muzian. In today's world, she was not interested in anything else except Muzian. Calculating the time, he should have almost finished solving it. With the help of the will of heaven, the Queen of the Demon Realm naturally does not worry about any changes on Muzian's side, unless the will of heaven manifests itself. But in the 9 states that are now shielded from the secrets of heaven, there is no possibility of heaven's coming. The Queen of the Demon Realm looks so anxious. I guess she's not planning to go back in a hurry, right? Seeing that the Queen of the Demon Realm wanted to leave, Muji had a slight smile on her cute face. Are you planning to go find Muir? She deliberately emphasized the tone of the title Muir to express that she was different from others. Such a title successfully attracted the attention of not only the Queen of the Demon Realm, but also Gong Lianyu. It seems that the relationship between the Lord of Life and my shepherd is quite good. Ruoxi would like to thank the Lord of Life for his help this time. At this moment, a cold and soft voice sounded, and the black and white dress gradually turned into a white palace dress. The full and straight breasts were supported by the material, which already revealed the identity of the owner. By Ruoxi, I heard in the past that he once actively pursued you, and later you became a Taoist couple. Mu Ji said with a smile, but if I remember correctly, you approached him for some other purpose in the beginning. Bai Ruoxi was slightly startled. Mu Ji's words brought back some long-standing memories in her, and the expression on her face became much more subtle. Mu Ji glanced disdainfully at Yao Meng, who stood under the sky like a fairy from Guanggan Palace, and said, "There is no need to say more about the Qing Emperor. Your purpose of approaching him in the first place was to create a furnace. Your relationship developed later, didn't it? As for the Queen of the Demon Realm, I heard him say, were you his Taoist companion in the previous life?" The Queen of the Demon Realm looked at Mu Ji and smiled charmingly, "I am indeed his Taoist companion in the previous life." However, upon hearing this, Mu Ji smiled lightly and said, "But how come I heard that you almost killed him accidentally when we were in Tianqian City? Is this what you said a Taoist monk in his previous life should do? Muzian would be shocked if he were here." Mu Ji didn't even know about these things when she went to the Forbidden Land of Life not long ago. However, within a few days, she had already investigated what happened in Tianqian City in the past. Got it crystal clear. A few simple words directly gave the Queen of the Demon Realm a dangerous luster in her eyes, and she said slowly, "I've heard in the past that the Forbidden Land of Life spies are all over Kyushu. Does it seem that part of my demon world has been infiltrated by the Forbidden Land of Life?" The fact that she had come to Tianqian City in Dongzhou was only known to a few high-level officials in the demon world. Mu Ji knew about this unknown past, obviously because she had her own spies in the demon world. This little silver-haired girl looks innocent, but if you let your guard down because of this, you may be eaten up and wiped clean one day without even knowing it. It's not just the demon world. Mu Ji played with a strand of hair and looked around at Yao Meng and Bai Ruoxi with a smile, her eyes somewhat meaningful. "If possible, I hope the three people in the future can stay away from me." The Lord of Life would choose this moment to reveal the dark history of the three people, and there was no lack of demonstration in it. However, she clearly picked the wrong target for her demonstration. "Are you threatening me?" The Queen of the Demon Realm narrowed her eyes and spoke softly. "It's not you." Mu Ji smiled lightly and said, "It's you. At the same time, it threatens the three major forces of Sword Palace, Yaokai, and Demon Realm. If this matter spreads, I am afraid people will think that the Lord of Life is crazy." However, Mu Ji has this confidence. What appears here now is just a clone of her, and her true body is still in the Forbidden Land of Life. As long as she is in the Forbidden Area of Life, she is invincible. The Queen of the Demon Realm's eyes had a dangerous luster. But Yao Meng always stood quietly in the air, in the fairy mist, with a charming smile on his face, quietly looking at the Lord of Life. Bai Ruoxi lowered her eyes slightly, her gentle eyes a little dark. Just because there are informants in various parts of Kyushu, he dares to provoke the three Yahua realms in front of them and reveal their past dark history. This is not a wise move. Soon, Bai Ruoxi raised her gentle eyes and asked softly, "From the senior's tone just now, it seems that your relationship with Mu Lang is unusual." Mu Ji played with the life-forbidden object with her fingertips and said casually, "Not only is this extraordinary, he and I made an engagement when we were young, so he is my fiancé. Of course you don't need any reason to help your fiancé. Sister Kingdi, you should also know about this, right?" When she finished speaking, she smiled and looked at Yao Meng, who had never spoken. The queen of the demon realm and Bairuoxi subconsciously looked at Yao Meng. Then, under Muji's gaze, a charming smile appeared on Yao Meng's face. She did not answer, but lightly talked about a seemingly insignificant topic. Counting the time, the Dacian dynasty should be fighting for the right to inherit the throne right now. After that, any emperor who takes the throne can temporarily stabilize the overall situation. Of course, if it is Princess Yongning, my husband will be even more pleased. Muji frowned slightly, and for some reason, she suddenly had a bad feeling in her heart. What do you want to say? I came to the Dacian dynasty this time to help him stabilize the situation in Dacian, and now I have done that. Yao Meng paused for a moment and continued, Muji, you are so unscrupulous because you know that even if I attack, I will at most kill one of your clones, so you don't care, right? Muji smiled non-committally. At this time, Yao Meng continued to ask inadvertently, since you have investigated our past experiences, you should know what my personality and hobbies are, right? Suddenly, at Muji's feet, a pure green lotus suddenly lit up. Unexpectedly, Yao Meng would take action so decisively. Muji's face changed slightly, and she was about to raise her hand to summon the forbidden life object. Since you are my husband's fiancée, then we are all good sisters, so don't use such dangerous things to avoid hurting each other's feelings. However, at this moment, a charming voice suddenly came to her ears, making Muji's eyes slightly dazed. When she woke up again, the queen of the demon realm had already arrived behind Muji unhurriedly, using the snake's tail imprisoned her. At the same time, the concentric lock slipped out of Bairuoxi's cuff silently and floated towards Muji. They didn't want to kill her. Muji, who realized this fact, vaguely smelled a hint of danger, and her clear voice changed for the first time, what do you want to do? The queen of the demon realm looked at the silver-haired girl who was close at hand with a smile and said, did you know? Ever since I learned about the various ways Qing Emperor treated my husband in the past, I have become interested in one thing. Her appearance suddenly changed from the smoky queen of the demon world to a cute silver-haired girl. Her black dress was fluttering in the cold wind, giving her a sickly beauty. The queen of the demon realm who turned into Muji smiled and stroked the pretty little face of the Lord of Life, and said softly, I don't know what will happen to you when you see your fiancé being suppressed by me later. What's the reaction? I'm looking forward to it. She smiled and said, unmarried wife. I haven't asked for tickets for a long time. There are a little few tickets today. Please give me some tickets and blades. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 599. Muzian raised his hand and took the ruler back into his body, playing with the broken leaf in his hand. Forbidden items in the Eternal Forbidden Land require 1/3 of your lifespan to be used each time. Every forbidden object is really special. This red dust leaf is all-encompassing and can accommodate everything in the world. In a sense, it seems to be similar to the cave sky, Muzian suddenly said with a somewhat emotional tone. But then again, if the ancestral weapon is a weapon made of immortal gold, then where did the forbidden object come from? Miss Tiandeo said calmly, forbidden objects are the natural birth of heaven and earth, and are not weapons made by humans. Forbidden things are born naturally from heaven and earth. Muzian was stunned for a moment and said with some hesitation, so the 9 different taboo objects were actually handed over to the 9 taboo places by Tiandeo after they were obtained, instead of being tailor-made for them by Tiandeo. That's right, Master. Miss Tiandeo nodded slightly. One more thing is certain. The measuring ruler in your hand seems to be higher than the forbidden object. Muzian was not particularly surprised by this. It would be better to say that he had vaguely guessed it. Not long ago, when the Lord of Eternity summoned the red dust leaf to devour him, it was blocked by the sky measuring ruler. From this point on, he could already guess something. You should have kept the memories of their 2 clones, right? Muzian suddenly remembered this matter. The taboo land today does not know that Miss Tiandeo helped him cheat. Their clones are not able to transmit memories to the main body in real time. As long as they can keep their clones and cut off the memories of the clones, Miss Tiandeo has already joined the team. No one will know about Xian's news. Everything is going perfectly according to plan. The only omission in the plan was that Miss Tiandeo said that not long ago, the Lord of Taboos planned to summon the true Deo of Heaven and let it descend on Kyushu to impose heavenly punishment on those who violated the rules. Fortunately, the secret of heaven was blocked, and the law of heaven could not come to Kyushu. I am still too weak now, or in other words, little Yuan Luo is still too weak. If the law of heaven comes, there is a high probability that little Yuan Luo will not be able to deal with it. I need time, I need more time to make more powerful people resonate with Yuan Luo and make her stronger. Mu Jian secretly murmured to himself, having already made up his mind in his heart that after this time, more people would resonate with the new way of heaven and become a member of the heaven. When thinking of this, Mu Jian temporarily put Hong Chenya into the ring, then turned to look at Miss Tiandeo with a smile. Anyway, let's go meet Yao Meng and the others first, they should be waiting for us. However, after he finished speaking, Miss Tiandeo seemed to hesitate for a moment and reminded softly, "Master, please be careful. I always feel that the aura on the north side of the Dacian dynasty is a bit dangerous, it seems to be aimed at you." There was a bit of worry in the words, which made Miss Tiandeo, who had always been cold and inhumane, show such a worried look. It also made Mu Jian feel a little more wary and asked, "You mean, there might be a clone of the Forbidden Lord still alive? But how is this possible? The Qing Emperor, the Master of the Sword Palace, and the Demon Emperor of the Demon Realm, if they are the true form of the Forbidden Lord and the blessing of the rules, they may be able to hold them back. But they are just clones of a few taboo lords. Even with the blessing of taboo things, they can never be the opponents of the three feathered realms. Let alone three, it would be too much for one to handle." Miss Tiandeo closed her eyes slightly, and her spiritual consciousness spread out in that instant, completely bringing all living things in the Dacian dynasty under her spiritual control. The prince who was revolting and forcing Emperor Dacian to abdicate, the royal princesses and princes who were also eyeing the throne of Dacian, as well as the street vendors and people on the streets of Dacian who were completely unaware of the situation in the palace. All information and activities of everyone were completely integrated into her mind at this moment. In addition, a very strange picture flashed through Miss Tiandeo's mind. I don't know when two Lords of Life appeared, and one of the Lords of Life was tying up the other and throwing him into the inner cave. How's it going? Mu Jian's tentative inquiry brought Miss Tiandeo back to reality, and she slowly opened her eyes. Magnificent, calm, indifferent, and heart-stoppingly beautiful. Most of the taboo lords have been eliminated by King Di and others. But I don't know why, I noticed the auras of the two Lords of Life. They are now with Qing Emperor and others, and they seem to be waiting for your arrival, Master. One of them seems to be transformed by the Queen of the Demon Realm, Master, etc. Please be careful when you arrive. Although Miss Tiandeo controls all the information about all living things in Kyushu, she still cannot understand the behavior of the Queen of the Demon Realm. Her first reaction is that the other party is planning to do something to deceive her master. If this were not the case, the Queen of the Demon Realm would not have tied up the Lord of Life and thrown him into her cave. Mu Jian was startled, then asked with a smile, "So except for Mu Ji, all the other taboo lords have been eliminated?" "That's right, but I always feel that their behavior is a bit weird, so please be careful, Master, and don't let your guard down." Miss Tiandeo hesitated and reminded. "How could this be weird? 3 big sharks gathered in a fish pond. I would find it strange if they didn't quarrel." Mu Jian smiled and nodded, "I understand." Then he asked again, "Are they fighting each other now?" Miss Tiandeo shook her head slightly, "There is no sign of fighting." "That's okay." Mu Jian smiled, as steady as an old dog. The previous times Shura Field happened, it was all without Musian's expectation. But this time, Musian had already guessed the result before the Lord of Forbidden Arrival came. In Musian's fish pond, there are only three largest sharks, Yao Meng, Gong Lingyu, and Shi Zixuan. All three of them are very strong, but Gong Lianyu has Ruoxi by her side, so she won't be so impulsive now. Although Yao Meng doesn't say it, she is actually a broad-minded person and doesn't mind Musian and other girls. There are some intimate moves between them. But the premise is that it is under her control. Although the fairy seems to be ethereal and has no desires, in fact she still has some desires to control. Of course, Musian didn't mind. Rather, Yao Meng's desire for control made him quite happy. After all, in a sense, the desire for control was also a form of love. Moreover, he himself quite likes to eat soft rice. The only real danger is the queen of the demon world. Shi Zixuan was used to being strong in the past, and Musian was worried that after finishing the enemies in the Forbidden Land, she would take the initiative to provoke other people, thus causing unnecessary fights. After all, even when facing the sect leader, Shi Zixuan made provocative words and even planned to take action. But according to what Miss Tiandao just said, since the three of them have not had any small-scale fights now, it means that they are still very restrained. Seeing that Miss Tiandao was still a little uneasy, Musian thought for a while, and then asked softly, "If I encounter any danger in the future, can I rely on you? I do not belong to you alone, master." Miss Tiandao shook her head gently and said in a calm and indifferent tone, "Because of the constraints of the rules of heaven and earth, I cannot help any living being in Kyushu privately." Seeing that Musian seemed to be a little regretful, the emotionless Miss Tiandao's beautiful eyes flickered, and the corners of her mouth were slightly raised with a faint arc. "However, I will do my best without being noticed by the creatures of Kyushu. I will serve you with all my strength, master." Musian was startled, and then he couldn't help but stretched out his hand to gently rub Miss Tiandao's silky hair, and said softly, "Does this count as letting me run a small stove by myself? Tiandao will probably be angry if he sees it when the future comes, right? Let's talk about what happened at that time." Miss Tiandao buried her face in Musian's arms, like a docile cat, and said in a cold and soft voice, "At least it won't be able to come to Kyushu in a short time. She is no longer the Miss Tiandao of the past. Now she just wants to follow her master, and then gain his favor." Miss Tiandao is becoming more and more humane. Musian looked at the docile Miss Tiandao who was nestled in his arms, and couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Recalling her ruthlessness when he first met her in the restricted area, and now her docile attitude, the huge contrast was so huge that it pierced Musian's XP. I don't know when little Yuan Luo will be so sensible. Thinking of the aloof new Tiandao girl with white hair and red eyes, Musian couldn't help but feel his head tremble slightly. As a gathering of all the girls in the fish pond, Xiao Yuan Luo is a character that cannot be conquered. However, Musian still has some small expectations. He calmed down his thoughts slightly and said with a smile, "Anyway, let's go meet Yao Meng and the others first." He is not worried that Yongning will ultimately fail in this struggle for power. With the support of Yaokai Holy Land and Sword Palace, it is not difficult to guess who most of the ministers in the court will support. Unless there are other princes in the Dakian dynasty who have also united with some ancient forces and asked them to stand in line. But in today's East Continent, what other ancient forces can compare to behemoths like Sword Palace and Yaokai Holy Land? What's more, there is also a restricted area. Thinking of such things, Musian had already turned into a rainbow and swept towards the north of Dakian. The sky was gloomy, but Musian felt particularly comfortable. The fall of the Dakian dynasty was temporarily solved, and the secret of heaven was blocked, preventing the way of heaven from coming. After that, all he wanted to do seemed to be to celebrate Princess Yongning's proclaimed emperor. When Musian thought about this, he vaguely saw three slender and graceful figures in front of him. A bright smile appeared on his face, and he was about to raise his hand to say hello. However, the moment he raised his hand, he couldn't help but be stunned for a moment. For some reason, he suddenly felt that the eyes of the three people seemed to have a strange luster. Have all the Forbidden Lords been dealt with? He wanted to think about it, but they had all noticed his presence, so Muzian had no choice but to fly towards the three of them. Except for Muji, all other taboo lords have been sent back, Yao Meng said with a smile. Muji. When mentioning that girl, Muzian was also startled. Then he glanced at the slender girl and said, Zixuan, how did you become like Muji, where is she? The queen of the demon realm smiled and said, I had a little conflict with her just now, so I had to ask her to rest in my cave for a while. Muzian was stunned for a moment, then reacted, you locked her up. Not locked up, just let her rest for a while. The queen of the demon realm curled her lips, who asked her to provoke me? She also said that you and her were engaged when you were young, and she is your fiancé. There was a bit of sarcasm in her words, as if she was talking to Muzian, and as if she was deliberately teasing Muji, who was trapped in the cave at the moment. Even Muzian didn't expect these big sharks to be so fierce that they actually locked up a taboo master. He calmed down slightly, coughed lightly, and said, anyway, she came to the Dogon dynasty to help me this time, so let her go. Of course I will let her go, but not now. The queen of the demon realm smiled and said, after all, I still have to invite her to watch a show. Under Muzian's hesitant eyes, the queen of the demon realm walked towards Muzian step by step, with a hint of teasing in her soft and sweet voice, Mu Lang, if you want me to let your fiancé out, you should know what to do, right? Muzian didn't even have time to complain whether the person who said this was the opposite, and he subconsciously looked at Gong Lianyu and Yao Meng. I thought that the queen of the demon realm would object to what she said. However, to Muzian's surprise, neither Gong Lianyu nor the fairy said anything, but looked at him with a smile. What happened here just now? Why did they unite? At this moment, Muzian finally knew why he had a bad premonition in his heart just now. That was not an illusion, but there was really danger here. Danger in every sense. You know, the true form of the queen of the demon realm is a giant python that can devour everything. Muzian can't stand her alone. If Yao Meng and Gong Lianyu were added. However, at this moment, a brilliant golden light lit up beside Muzian, and Miss Tiandao took a step forward and said calmly, no one can force the master to do something he doesn't want to do. The queen of the demon realm narrowed her eyes, what do you mean? I will protect the master until the last moment, Miss Tiandao said in a cold voice without any emotion, confronting the three Yahua realm beings. Muzian was slightly startled, looking at Miss Tiandao's cold and beautiful appearance, and was a little moved for a while. At this time, only Miss Tiandao stood on his side. The will of heaven is indeed a fair and just arbiter. Yao Meng put one hand on her lips, tilted her head slightly, looked at the woman, and said casually, what if I take you with me? After a long silence, Miss Tiandao looked at Muzian silently. Then, under Muzian's surprised eyes, she took a step back. Sorry, master. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 600. Muzian was very pleased. What was gratifying was that Miss Tiandao, who was once stubborn and didn't know how to adapt, now finally knows how to adapt and has become more humane. Of course, this humanization is based on sacrificing him. Yao Meng just said something like surrender, and we will take you with us next time we suppress Mu Lang. Then, the invincible Miss Tiandao really surrendered. Although Miss Tiandao knows that flexibility is a good thing, but, she has betrayed her master. Is this really what a maid should do? Sure enough, Sister Mengru is more reliable, looking at Yao Meng, who was standing in the air with a playful smile in her eyes, and then silently glanced at Miss Tiandao behind her. Muzian silently helped her sigh. Even if he was not at the scene before, Muzian could still imagine how Mu Ji provoked Yao Meng and others not long ago. The Lord of Life can be said to have grown up with a silver spoon in his mouth and has never suffered a loss in his life. He would probably provoke Yao Meng and others because he had the idea of blessing him with taboo things. In addition, the person who appeared in the Dacian dynasty was not her true form, so it didn't matter even if she was really dead. Mu Ji probably thought so. However, Mu Ji misjudged the methods of the three big sharks in the fish pond. Leaving aside the others, Yao Meng's temperament seems to be quite gentle, like the big sister next door, but there is a prerequisite, that is, others cannot get on top of her. It can only be said that although Mu Ji thought that it would not matter even if something happened to her clone, she did not expect that Yao Meng and the others not only did not take action against her, but instead enthusiastically invited her to watch a movie. Although after watching this movie, Mu Ji will probably be so angry. His fiancée was getting intimate with other girls, but as his fiancée, he could only watch helplessly, unable to do anything. Muzian has no doubts about the possibility of Mu Ji turning black after she is liberated. No matter what, we can't let them act like this. Mu Jian coughed lightly and looked at Bai Ruoxi, whose plump breasts were enough to look down on the other girls. Malang, what can you do? Realizing that her sweetheart was staring at her, Bai Ruoxi shouted timidly and lowered her head shyly. Every move seems to be filled with inexplicable charm, a charm that makes people's eyes involuntarily drawn away. Muzian's eyes swept over her face involuntarily. After staying there for a long time, his eyes were slightly dazed. Then he realized what he was doing and calmed down slightly. There is no one in this world who can charm him, but Bai Ruoxi, who is also a nine-tailed fox, is an exception. The higher Bai Ruoxi's realm is, the greater the charm of the nine-tailed fox will be on her. Yes, he was simply charmed by the nine-tailed fox, not because he was fascinated by Naxi, absolutely not. Seemingly aware of the playful gazes of Yao Meng and the queen of the demon realm, Muzian did not squint his eyes and maintained his composure, saying, Mu Ji is also the master of life, and her pride will probably not allow her to be trapped in the cave. Shall we release her? Ruoxi, what do you think? To get Mu Ji out, it is unrealistic to find the queen of the demon realm or Yao Meng. The only thing we can hope for is the gentle and simple Miss Bai who knows how to care for Mu Ji. Muzian originally thought so. And he did see Bai Ruoxi showing a thoughtful look, and nodded slightly. Mu Lang is right. Mu Ji is the owner of the forbidden land of life and Mu Lang's childhood sweetheart. She also has an arrogant and difficult temperament. If we let her watch her fiancé being, she will definitely be angry. At this time, it turns out that only my Naxi is the most reliable. A gentle smile appeared on Muzian's face unconsciously, and then he heard Bai Ruoxi continue to say softly. So I just prepared a concentric lock for Sister Mu Ji. This concentric lock has now completed its evolution. My feelings will be completely synchronized with the Lord of Life. This way, she will not have no sense of participation. Participate in, a sense of participation? The smile that just appeared on Muzian's face faltered slightly. Miss Bai, are you sure that if you do this, Mu Ji will not be so angry that she will get sick and fight for you after she comes out? Unexpectedly, this sinister Miss Bai would come up with such a vicious method of punishment. Muzian felt a little ashamed. Ruoxi, that's not what I want to say. He wanted to say something, but he saw Bai Ruoxi biting her red lips and staring at him resentfully, looking aggrieved. Malang, do you think I have gone too far? It was as if he had suffered a great injustice just now, and now he saw his Taoist companion protecting others but not helping him, making him feel weak and helpless. Just the first glance can make people feel a bit of protective desire in their hearts. Yao Meng on the side looked at Bai Ruoxi's behavior with a bit of amusement in his eyes. Miss Bai usually stays quiet, so Gong Lianyu is basically the one who handles such occasions. But now it seems that when it comes to tea art, none of the 10 Gong Lianyu combined can be a match for Bai Ruoxi. It's worth learning. The queen of the demon realm also rarely said a word, but there was a hint of thinking in her eyes. For the queen of the demon realm, who has always been strong, Bairuoxi's demeanor and behavior are really a bit out of line. This beautiful snake belongs to the type of domineering female CEO. Instead of snuggling into the boy's arms like a weak little girl, she prefers the boy to snuggle into her arms weakly. But I have to admit that sometimes not being strong can solve everything, at least when it comes to tying a man's heart. Being strong alone is definitely not enough. She might be able to kidnap Musian back to the demon world, but that didn't mean she could keep his mind on her. Unless she uses the charm technique after she ascends. But this is obviously not in line with what the arrogant queen of the demon realm would do. Rather than directly charming Bamakazian, she still prefers to use her charm to conquer him. For this reason, Bairuoxi's strong side, and even Bairuoxi's weak side that can arouse a man's desire to protect, are all worthy of reference. Musian looked at Miss Bai in front of him. Although he wanted to speak several times, he was still defeated by her pitiful posture. Obviously, now is not the right time to ask the queen of the demon world to let him go. At least now they have no plans to let him go. I can only feel sorry for Muji for a while. While Musian was thinking about this, he suddenly heard the angry voice of a girl coming from the queen of the demon realm's cave. Qing Emperor, Gong Lianyu, and Master Zixuan, if you don't let me go, you're going to wait for this, then accept the revenge of the forbidden land of life. Retaliation? After returning to the demon world today, do you really think there will be traitors from the forbidden land of life left in our demon world? The queen of the demon realm's tone was somewhat sarcastic, and she gently raised her hand to completely isolate the voice in her cave. She has the ability to read minds, and it is not difficult to find a traitor hiding in the demon world, but now she has more important things to do than catching the traitor. The charming and sexy queen turned to look at Musian with a smile, a hint of playfulness in her bright red eyes. Concubine Shangyan seems to have impure motives for the disciples in her sect, right? What if? Knowing what is about to happen here, how will she feel? Suddenly, she suddenly mentioned someone. When she thought of this, the queen of the demon realm became even more excited. Not only did she want a guy who called himself fiancé to look at them well, she also wanted to see what concubine Shangyan would look like after knowing the truth. Just thinking about it makes people feel a sense of expectation. However, when she said this, she heard Yao Meng calmly say, "It seems like you don't know at all." The understatement of the words, coupled with the tone that seemed to be a bit sarcastic, also made the queen of the demon realm raise her eyebrows slightly and asked, "What do you know?" Yao Meng's hair was as long as a waterfall, and she wore a thin blue dress that gently blew with the cold wind, tightly wrapping her graceful and sexy figure. Realizing that Bairuoxi and others were looking at him with suspicion, Yao Meng said quietly with a somewhat complicated mood, "Concubine Shangyan has met him in the past." The queen of the demon realm was stunned. In the past. Her first reaction was that Emperor Qing was lying to her, but when she saw her complicated expression, she had to believe what Emperor Qing said. When was the past? Probably when he was little. To be more specific, it was probably when he first became enlightened. After speaking in a somewhat indifferent tone, Yao Meng saw that Bairuoxi and the queen of the demon realm were both in a state of shock at the same time. In Kyushu, the time for children to start their enlightenment is probably at the age of 3 or 4, and later at the age of 5. In other words, concubine Shangyan has known Musian from a long time ago, and she had already set her sights on him even then. Bairuoxi's expression suddenly froze for a moment, and she was almost unsteady on her feet. If Kingdi's words were not deceiving, wouldn't it mean that Mulang had already taken the shape of someone when he was a child? Miss Tiandao's eyes also changed slightly. To be honest, she was very interested in her master's past. After all, everything about Musian was not recorded in the records of heaven. She wanted to know what the past masters had experienced. And the most important thing is, that is the master of my childhood. The master looks so good looking when he grows up, he must have been very cute when he was a child. The queen of the demon realm finally came back to her senses after a brief moment of confusion. She calmed down slightly and looked up almost involuntarily in the direction of the Tuyi section. She whispered to herself, "So, Mulang will choose the Tuyitan section. Maybe it's not a coincidence, but it's something that's already been determined. They are all the top executives in Kyushu, so they naturally know many unknown secrets. For example, some people's future routes have been secretly arranged by a powerful person from the time they were born." The queen of the demon realm also did similar things. But she didn't expect that her Taoist companion in her previous life would be concubine Shangyan's fish. What feelings did concubine Shangyan have towards him? The queen of the demon realm suddenly thought to herself. If it was a relationship between a man and a woman, there should be no reason for the other party to let Musian be intimate with other women. After all, if she had met Musian when she was a child, concubine Shangyan would have had too many opportunities to make Musian obsessed with her alone. But if it weren't for the love between a man and a woman, it would be impossible to explain the intimacy that concubine Shangyan and Musian did back then. I really want to drag that woman out and ask her clearly. Looking in the direction of Lianji sect, the ruler of the demon world narrowed her beautiful eyes, with a bit of danger in her eyes. Or, after this, use the recording stone to record the intimate scenes between her and Mulang, and then send it to the sect leader to see? The queen of the demon world was thinking about such a dangerous thing, and Bairuoxi's gentle eyes also lingered on Musian. Even if he didn't look at her, Musian could feel the danger in the eyes of the cold and weak young lady. If they knew that I had suppressed the karmic fire for the sect master's sister, would I be able to see the sun in Juzhu smoothly in the next few months? Musian forced himself to remain calm, coughed lightly and said, "I don't really remember anything about the sect master and I when we were kids. Anyway, let's go back to the court and see what the situation is like now. At least we have to make sure that the Dogon dynasty will not collapse and the situation can be stabilized. Even if the heavenly secret is blocked now and the heavenly Dao cannot descend, no one can guarantee that if the Dogon dynasty collapses, the heavenly Dao can ignore the blocked heavenly secret and descend directly to Juzhu. Don't worry." Yao Meng sat in the void, surrounded by fairy mist, and looked at Musian with a smile in her green eyes. "You seem to want to get away from us as soon as possible. What's wrong? Is sister so scary?" Musian shook his head and sighed, "I'm just worried that the coming of the heavenly Dao will affect the situation in Juzhu, and I'm not very reassured." At this time, the queen of the demon realm joined the battlefield. "Even if you go there, you can't intervene in this battle for the throne. Instead of waiting there, you might as well wait and see the result after this. Although you can't interfere directly, now there is news in the Dogon dynasty that the three ancient forces in Dongzhou support Princess Yongning to take the throne. At least the situation is most favorable to her. If it was just an ancient force, the ministers of the Dogon dynasty might worry that the dynasty would be controlled in the future. But there are three forces. This means that these three parties will check and balance each other, which makes people feel much more at ease." Musian was about to say something else, but at this time, Bairuoxi reached out and took his arm, raised her beautiful eyes, and whispered, "Mulang, let's go back to Tianhe Garden first. It's quieter there, and no one will disturb us." Can I refuse?" Musian was madly complaining in his heart, but in the end he succumbed to Nai 11's heart and nodded silently. Miss Tiandao always followed Musian until they arrived at Tianhe Garden. She looked at Musian's helpless look, hesitated slightly, and whispered, "Will the master blame me for not protecting you?" Musian, who was already lying on the soft couch, heard the words and couldn't help but reach out and wave to her gently. After seeing Miss Tiandao walk to his side and squat down obediently, Musian reached out and gently stroked her hair, saying softly, "Compared to the cold you in the past, you are more like a human being now. Honestly, I am very relieved. Of course, it would be better if you don't sell the master next time." She actually sold her master just for the spiritual energy of the natural furnace. Musian couldn't help but sigh when he thought of this. It seems that Miss Tiendao needs to be taught a lesson. After hearing the comfort of her master, Miss Tiendao was obviously much more relaxed, and her beautiful eyes without any emotion also softened a little. Compared to the past, she was like a high god, executing the will of Tiendao. Now she prefers to accompany the master like now. Like now, let him touch her head. Miss Tiendao slowly closed her eyes, enjoying such a warm atmosphere. However, at this moment, she seemed to hear a mocking silver bell laughter, which made Miss Tiendao open her eyes suddenly. She frowned slightly, raised her head, and stared at Musian's eyes silently. For a moment, she seemed to see through Musian's eyes and saw a soft white light appearing in those eyes. And the little silver-haired girl in the white light. It's the new Tiendao. The two Tiendaos met for the first time in this special way. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 601. Miss Tiendao stared into Musian's eyes. Although the two seemed to be looking at each other, Miss Tiendao at this moment had already seen a girl deep in his furnace through Musian's eyes. Illustration has smooth silver white hair, and her complicated white dress wraps her delicate and graceful curves. She sits with her slender white silk legs crossed, leaning against the throne with her cheeks in her hands, swaying the deer under her feet. Leather boots. Miss Tiendao closed her eyes silently. In an instant, her spiritual consciousness escaped directly into Musian's cauldron and appeared in front of Yuan Luo. Who are you? Miss Tiendao said in an emotionless tone. Yuan Luo rolled her eyes charmingly and said in a lazy tone, don't ask knowingly. You are also a god. How could you not know who I am? Miss Tiendao was silent for a moment. I hate you very much, the breath on your body is very uncomfortable. The girl in front of her is a different kind of person, and unlike Musian, this little girl is another kind of alien. She felt the aura of similarity from this girl's body. But you must know that she is the incarnation of the will of heaven. Apart from the existence of the will of heaven, who else in this world can make Miss Tiendao feel that the other person is the same kind? Logically speaking, there is no such thing. But Miss Tiendao saw someone of the same kind at this moment. And, for the first time, she felt a huge threat. The Queen of the Demon Realm, the Qing Emperor, and the Master of the Sword Palace, the resonance between the three Ascension realms and the new Heavenly Dao has gradually made Yuan Luo's combat power stronger. In addition, the Spirit Dragon and the Princess who are still in seclusion and resonate with her, even if it is not a collection of all living things, the current kite cannot be underestimated. Were you spying on me earlier? Miss Tiendao spoke again, her beautiful eyes as clear as glass, staring at Yuan Luo calmly, her expression never changing. Yuan Luo corrected, to be precise, I'm not spying on you, but I just want to see if the law of heaven will come so early. But looking at it like this, when the secret of heaven is blocked, even the law of heaven cannot come directly to Kyushu. There was a bit more sarcasm in his tone. Miss Tiendao was silent in a rare moment. You should know that as long as living beings are immortal in this world, I cannot perish. Even if I can block the secret of heaven for a while, I cannot block it for a lifetime. This is not something I need to consider. This is something he has to consider in the future. Yuan Luo let out a hey and jumped down from the throne. With small steps, she jumped up and down in front of Miss Tiendao, and raised her pair of magnificent bright red eyes. But I am quite curious, if the way of heaven really comes, will you help him, or will you resume your duties according to the will of heaven? Miss Tiendao said calmly, my current personality was given to me by him, so as a maid, I will help him. When she said this, she paused slightly and said again, are you suspecting that I have ulterior motives for approaching him? Yuan Luo was non-committal and said with a smile, "Isn't it true? You just said that your personality was given to you by that guy. In a sense, the personality you are now close to him and close to him, isn't it? For the purpose of creating a natural furnace. In fact, the will of heaven is so easily corrupted, in fact, in a sense, it is also because of the emergence of humanity in heaven itself. If he is aloof and has no emotions and desires, how could his differentiated will be seduced by the aura of the natural furnace, and even develop personality, an emotion that is similar to that of human beings? In the beginning, it was really for the natural furnace cauldron, in fact, it is no exception now. Miss Tiandeo said calmly, "But now I will follow the master, not just for the spiritual energy of the natural furnace." In front of Xi and Tiandeo, Miss Tiandeo very frankly admitted that she was indeed the body of Lu Musian at the beginning. "That's really surprising. I thought you would make a few excuses." Yuan Luo looked at Miss Tiandeo with a bit of surprise. "According to what you just said, aren't you following him just for the sake of being a natural furnace?" Yuan Luo continued with a smile, "Is it because his skills are so good that you became addicted to him after being taught a few times by sticks? Normally, girls might be ashamed to say such things, but for Xi and Tiandeo, there is no so-called sense of shame. In the final analysis, Yuan Luo represents heaven, which is the new way of heaven that is superior and has no human emotions. The petite and cute look and tone she has now are all the result of her taking into account the personalities of the girls Musian met. It can be said that Yuluo is the purest way of heaven. She has seen countless human emotions and can understand their emotions, but she is the only one who cannot embody this emotion. There is a Buddhist method in the Western regions, and practitioners can eventually achieve Arhat status through continuous reincarnation. Maybe that Arhat and a certain woman were Taoist lovers in a past life, and they loved each other to death. However, every time Arhat reincarnates, he has to experience a disaster. After repeated reincarnations, even the woman Arhat once loved most was just one of his love tribulations in his many reincarnations, nothing more. In a sense, Iris is similar to this. It's not that she doesn't understand emotions, it's that she sees through everything, so she can't embody her own emotions. It is precisely because of this that she has a strong interest in the corruption of the will of heaven. I am indeed addicted to the spiritual energy given by the Master, and I don't want to leave his side. Miss Tiandeo replied calmly, as if she was stating a simple matter. In the final analysis, the reason why you are able to speak so condescendingly and from the perspective of a superior is because you have not experienced the aura of the Tian furnace cauldron. If you had personally experienced the natural furnace cauldron, you would never say such words again. Miss Tiandeo said expressionlessly. I'm different from you. Don't compare me with those guys whose will is so easily shaken. Yuan Luo curled her lips disdainfully, her tone full of condescension and arrogance. In the final analysis, the spiritual energy in the heaven is from the same source as the natural furnace cauldron. I know exactly how tempting the spiritual energy of the natural furnace cauldron is. It's not like she has never kissed Musian in the past. She has also tried the aura of Tian furnace. However, even so, she never indulged in it. The will of the new heaven will not be shaken by anything. It doesn't matter whether it's Zhu's heavenly way or Musian's natural furnace cauldron. Miss Tiandeo asked calmly, if that's the case, then why did you secretly spy on me before? Isn't it just out of curiosity? Yuan Luo nodded slightly, there is indeed a reason for curiosity. Although the heavenly Dao possesses human nature and may indeed be corrupted, it is still the assembly of all living beings, and its will can represent the will of all living beings in the 9 provinces. And such a will can be corrupted so easily by the spiritual energy of the Tian furnace, even the omniscient Yuan Luo can't understand it. After my explanation, do you still suspect that I approached him for another purpose? Miss Tiandeo asked. Certainly. A charming smile appeared on Yuan Luo's lips. According to my personal understanding, although the natural furnace cauldron is tempting, it should not be able to directly corrupt the will of heaven. So, did you see anything through observation? Miss Tiendao asked. Unfortunately, I can't see anything. Yuan Luo shook her head gently and stared into Miss Tiendao's eyes, but one thing is certain, you are different from me. Your current personality is not imitating others, but actually giving birth to your own personality. So if you stay by his side, I can rest assured. Do you also have those thoughts about Master? Miss Tiendao suddenly asked. Me? How is that possible? Yuan Luo curled her lips disdainfully. I'm different from you. My terminal didn't make any mistakes. Even the tone I use when talking to you now is me imitating someone else's personality. After finishing speaking, she continued, it's almost time for you to go back. If you continue to stay here, he will suspect that I have the same strange hobby of observing human beings like a certain fairy. Now that it is confirmed that the will of heaven has its own personality, she can be relieved for the time being when she approaches Musian. Not doubtful, but already convinced. However, at this moment, the young man's gentle voice suddenly came from the huge heaven, which also attracted the attention of Yuan Luo and Miss Tiendao involuntarily. Looking at the young man who came into view, Yuan Luo was startled, and then showed an innocent smile. Brother, why did you run into the heaven? Musian's forehead was covered with black lines. The will of heaven and I were chatting and suddenly there was no sound, and there was also movement in the heaven. It would be strange if I still couldn't react. Yuan Luo glanced at the young man slightly, and said a little aggrievedly, why are you staring at me so fiercely? It's all for your own good. Heaven is an enemy no matter what. Even if the will born from him surrenders to you, it may just be planning some plans. I have to confirm it, right? Musian let out a long sigh. Yuan Luo, now I really wonder if you have nothing else to do except spy on others. Although she was in heaven, it seemed that no major events in Kyushu could escape Yuan Luo's eyes. If Musian hadn't reacted quickly, he might not have known that Miss Tiendao's spiritual consciousness had escaped into the heaven, and he had even met Miss Yuan Luo. I have to make corrections. I couldn't spy on you at will before. Yuan Luo said seriously, I won't be able to observe the outside world through your natural furnace until you truly realize enlightenment. So, in a sense, my strength will also affect Yuan Luo, Mu Jian thought to himself. But you can rest assured. I don't like to spy on others. These days, I am not so much spying on you as I am to observe the will of heaven and confirm her purpose of approaching you, Yuan Luo explained. Musian said oh, but obviously didn't believe it. Telling a joke, Yao Meng said, I have been sleeping in the past and don't like to peek into other people's private lives. What's the result after your observation? Musian asked. The will of heaven can be trusted, at least the performance in front of you seems to be trustworthy, Yuan Luo replied. I previously suspected that the will of heaven imitated the personality of others to get close to you, but just now I can confirm that she is indeed humanity was born, and this humanity was given to her. Musian thought for a moment, is it because I kissed her before? But didn't you also? Yuan Luo had kissed him once before, although it was just a light touch of the lips, but it was close anyway. Yuan Luo sat lazily leaning in the void, glanced at him, dangling her small white silk jade feet, and her voice was full of a different kind of cold texture. It seems that you still don't understand. I can be intimate with you like the will of heaven. Yuan Luo's first sentence made Musian stunned for a moment, and then he heard her continue, it's just that I don't have human emotions. After all, this is the way of heaven. When the way of heaven has human emotions, it will also be the beginning of disaster. Just like the guy who is now covering the entire Kyushu, Yuan Luo said lightly. Musian shuddered slowly as if he had thought of something, and asked subconsciously, you mean, heaven has humanity? Yeah, it's scary, isn't it? The collection of all living things, everything he did should be for all living things, but such an existence one day gave birth to humanity, had its own desires, and was loyal to its own desires. Yuan Luo appeared in front of Musian at a certain moment. She was suspended in the air, gently holding the boy's face. Her bright red eyes were so beautiful, and even the ambiguous breath between each other was so holy. But when staring into those eyes, Musian clearly felt like he was staring into the abyss. For the first time, he realized that the girl named Yuan Luo did not have humanity, nor did she have the feelings called human. Because as she said herself, when the collection of all living things has its own will, it will also be the beginning of disaster. According to what you said just now, the heavenly Dao will not have human emotions. How did the humanity of the heavenly Dao come into being? Musian suddenly asked. This is my blind spot in knowledge. Yuan Luo retracted her hand and shrugged. The heavenly Dao was born countless times longer than me. Maybe something happened since its birth that made it have desires. Musian subconsciously looked at Miss Tiandao on the side, but the woman just shook her head gently. Sorry, Master, I don't know why the heavenly Dao gave birth to humanity. Musian remained silent. Even the will of the heavenly Dao does not know the truth, so it is even more unrealistic for him to know. Do you have any other questions? If not, I will send you back, Yuan Luo asked with a smile. One last thing. Musian looked at Yuan Luo and asked softly, do you also know that this world has been restarted several times? Yuan Luo opened her mouth slightly, revealing a surprised look of there is such a thing, really? I didn't feel it at all in the heavenly court. The heavenly court will not be affected by the restart of the world, Musian asked subconsciously. Yuan Luo said calmly, of course, what does restarting the world have to do with heaven? Anything else? Yuan Luo asked again. Musian shook his head. Yuan Luo blinked her red eyes, held her cheek and looked at him, with an innocent face. Think about it again. Musian pondered for a moment and shook his head with certainty. Yuan Luo said in his ear, you forgot to give me a goodbye kiss, idiot. Dong dong. Musian's heartbeat suddenly accelerated. As soon as he raised his head, he saw Yuan Luo showing a charming smile and gently waving at him. Obviously, she was just teasing him. This Yuan Luo, why not marry her? Before Musian could speak, he felt his consciousness falling into the abyss in the sense of weightlessness, and then in less than 3 seconds, his consciousness and body overlapped. The next moment, he suddenly opened his eyes. What came into view was no longer the heavenly palace just now, but the bedroom. Miss Tiandao, wearing a fairy gold battle armor, quietly nestled in his arms, and the surroundings were quiet. Faintly, he felt that a faint green light seemed to pass by in front of his eyes, so he turned his head and looked. The slender figure of Yao Meng came into view. It seems that you just had a beautiful dream, she said with a smile. At this time, the door opened, and Musian saw the clean-shaven Biruoxi staring at him shyly. This atmosphere, Musian, who had experienced many battles, naturally understood it in seconds, and subconsciously held his waist. Faintly, he seemed to hear a girl's extremely angry cry. Musian looked in the direction of the voice, but only saw a gorgeous woman in a plum-colored dress leaning on a soft couch, with silver bones and charcoal blazing, and the fire dancing in the wind that penetrated in. The queen of the demon realm glanced at Musian and said with a sweet smile, it seems that the Lord of Life can't wait to start. I almost forgot that Muji was still trapped in the cave of the queen of the demon realm. Musian opened his mouth slightly and wanted to say something. However, before that, the queen of the demon realm had already said casually, I know, you want to release your fiancé, right? Musian shook his head gently and said in a kind tone as much as possible, Zixian, you have offended a taboo place. If you offend Muji as well. Musian hoped that the queen of the demon realm would release people, naturally for many reasons. But he obviously underestimated the arrogance of the queen of the demon realm. I have already offended an immortal forbidden land, so what if I offend a life forbidden land? The next moment, the queen of the demon realm appeared silently beside Musian, with a pair of charming and affectionate eyes full of tenderness, and whispered, "But it is still very touching that Mu Lang would consider me so much. So I will let her out." Musian was delighted, but before he could speak, the queen of the demon realm reached out and took his arm, put her sexy red lips close to his ear, and whispered, "But the premise of letting her go is that I am in a good mood. So for your fiancé, you know what to do, right? Warm tips: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding." So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 602. Musian finally agreed to this request that seemed a little off. There was no way, this was also for Muji. In fact, he was a little worried and even helpless at the beginning. Whether it was Yao Meng, Nai 11 or the Queen of the Demon Realm, because they were all in the Yahua realm, their blood and essence were almost inexhaustible. Musian was even a little worried that his natural furnace would be completely exhausted in a few days. But after thinking about it carefully, he worked hard to raise fish. Wasn't it just for the girls to have a day of harmony with each other? And now he has realized the truth, his body is far stronger than before, and he wants to satisfy the Queen of the Demon Realm and let her release him in the future. It is not impossible. When he thought of this, Musian quickly gathered his thoughts, stood up and stretched his waist, and closed the doors and windows by the way. But Musian obviously didn't notice that not far outside his bedroom, there was a pair of eyes looking at the scene with disdain. Wei Men grew. When she saw Musian coming back not long ago, the maid was still a little excited, but she tried hard to suppress it, waiting for the young master to come to her. However, now, Wei Mengru's original expectation has now become bleak. Although she did hide her breath and was difficult to be detected, the young master obviously knew that she was in Tianhe Garden. Even if he couldn't detect her breath, he should have thought of her first when he came back, right? But now it seems the young master has long been happy and reluctant to leave. Although she has no interest in participating in everyone's opening, she still feels uncomfortable when she sees this scene. If something happens to him again this time, she will never help him again even if she dies. When Wei Mengru thought of this, she silently retracted her gaze and was about to leave. However, at this moment, a cold voice without any emotion suddenly came to her ears: "If you think about him so much, why not drive away all the other women? Who is here?" Wei Mengru raised her head suddenly and looked around, but she didn't notice anything. Is it an illusion? She was thinking about this in her mind, but suddenly heard that voice again in her ears: "Don't you want to monopolize your young master? You don't have to share with other women, you can only enjoy it yourself." Original witch. This time, Wei Mengru finally realized who the person who spoke was. However, after the fusion of the spiritual consciousness of the two original witches, it never affected her will. Why now? She shook her head gently, dispelled the messy thoughts in her mind, and tried to calm herself down as much as possible. Faintly, a cold touch came on her cheek, and Wei Mengru subconsciously raised her head and looked at the cold winter night. It's snowing. 3 days later. Unconsciously, it was winter again, and the courtyard was covered with snow. The charcoal fire from last night had burned out. Musian opened the door and let the fresh air mixed with the chill pour into the room, which also made him a little more awake. So they left me alone in Tianhe Garden after they were done. Looking at the vast snow scene outside the window, recalling the various scenes of the past 3 days, Musian couldn't help but sighed. It felt a bit like Versailles. I can only say that I was a little tired, but that feeling was indeed wonderful. The feeling of being almost happy to the extreme in both body and mind was something Musian had never experienced before. That was true. After all, the Queen of the Demon Realm could transform into anyone, and Yao Meng's own appearance was pleasing to the eye, and Ruoxi was very big, The three different experiences were superimposed together, turning into greater happiness. I just don't know when the Queen of the Demon Realm is going to release Muji. Musian was lying on the windowsill thinking about such things, when he suddenly noticed that there seemed to be a pair of dark eyes in a corner outside the window staring at him silently. Menro. Musian followed that gaze, and when he saw the identity of the owner in the corner, he couldn't help but be shocked and ask subconsciously, "When did you get there? It's snowing so heavily outside, be careful not to catch a cold." There was a pavilion not far outside the bedroom, and under the pavilion stood a woman in a goose yellow dress with a cold temperament. After hearing what the young master said, Wei Mengru just glanced at the young master and sneered, "Why didn't you care about me so much last night? After finishing today, you know that she will be cold outside." Musian was slightly stunned. "You were in Tianhe Garden last night." Wei Mengru shook her head gently. Just as Musian was about to show a relieved look, he saw Wei Mengru said coldly, "I was here when you came back with King Di and others 3 days ago." Musian. 3 days ago? Musian fell into a brief contemplation. Speaking of which, Sister Mengru returned to the sect on her own after she and he separated from the Blue Clan that day, so where else could she go except Tianhe Garden? It's just that Wei Mengru had been shielding her own aura before, and as a result, even his master forgot about her. Wei Mengru, who has integrated 2 original witch spirits, is unknown in terms of her current combat power, but at least when she hides her own aura, as long as the distance is appropriate, even the Hedeo realm cannot detect her existence. In other words, everything that happened in the room with him, Yao Meng and others in the past 3 days was. No matter how firm his mentality was, Musian couldn't help but cover his face silently at this moment. "Why are you so shy? It's not like I didn't know what you did when we were in Tianqian City," Wei Mengru said scornfully. "Didn't I already know that everyone on the bus can get on you?" with a calm demeanor. "Oh, that's true." Musian was relieved all of a sudden. Wei Mengru knew his dark history very well and had long known what kind of temper his young master had. How could he still be embarrassed when facing this maid? "Since Sister Mengru has been in Tianhe Garden for the past 3 days, have you seen where Zixuan and the others went today?" Musian suddenly asked. Wei Mengru looked at him sideways. "Did you faint last night? You didn't even realize they left the room." She added again, "Today the new emperor of the Dacian dynasty came to power, and both Yaokai and Sword Palace have received invitations." "So, does Yongning take over?" Musian asked subconsciously. Under normal circumstances, even if the new emperor comes to power, it is impossible to invite the ancient forces in Dongzhou to participate. However, there have been rumors that the 3 ancient forces support Yongning. Even if these 3 ancient forces do not openly support Yongning, it is enough to make people fearful. At least, although these 3 ancient forces did not express support, they did not declare that the news was false. This ambiguous attitude also made many ministers in the Dacian dynasty secretly vigilant. Wei Mengru said calmly, "They did not go to Dacian, but Yaokai and Jian Palace also sent people to send gifts. I heard that the restricted area also sent people. Qing Emperor and the others are going to deal with matters in the Forbidden Land." Forbidden places, Musian couldn't help but frown slightly. "I remember that the forbidden places almost disappeared before. Why are they so active now? Could it be that they have other ways to bring the law of heaven down?" Wei Mengru looked at Musian quietly and said nothing. "What's wrong, Sister Mengru?" Musian asked strangely. "When do you think the Forbidden Land became active?" Wei Mengru asked. "If I must say it, the activity of the Forbidden Land only started after Musian realized the Tao. Before that, the only place that disturbed the Forbidden Place was the time when the Qing Emperor emerged and ascended. But at that time, they did not realize that a small monk in the realm of returning to the virtual world could actually affect the situation in Zhuzhou, and even let a great master of Hedeo break away from the shackles of heaven and earth. So I should be blamed. Musian couldn't help but laugh. Wei Mengru said calmly, it's true if you have to say that. The young master can be said to be a disaster for the country and the people now. In order to get you, the Forbidden Land has probably had a private conversation in secret, thinking about how to cooperate to take you away. Come on. This time in the Dacian dynasty, the Lord of Taboo sent basically clones, and the memories of the clones were erased by Mistiendio, so they did not know what happened in the Dacian dynasty. But just because they don't know, doesn't mean they won't investigate. At least, several Taboo lords will soon know that Musian designed a trap to kill them. Musian showed a thoughtful look and suddenly said, speaking of which, are you hinting to me not to leave the sect during this period? Sister Mengru still cares about me, Musian quickly said with a smile. Wei Mengru's pretty face quickly turned red. She glanced at him uncomfortably and said calmly, I just don't want to increase my workload. Your mother, she gave me a commission before and asked me to take care of her. Good on you, I'll have a headache too if you run around. Muwanj. Musian thought of the woman who had brought him up single-handedly, his eyes were slightly dazed, and he looked at the snow scene in silence for a long time. Then, he raised his head and looked in a certain direction outside Tianhe Garden. Do you want to go to Lianji Peak? Wei Mengru asked. Well, I want to see the sect master again. Musian turned to look at the cold face of the maid, and said with a smile, although the sect master's sister likes to be the Riddler, she helped shield the secrets this time. Thank you very much, I want to thank her personally. Then you promise me your life? Wei Mengru looked at him sideways. Musian, I'm not that kind of person. Neither is my elder sister. The maid just said ha and gave the young master a contemptuous roll of her eyes. Not long after, Musian and Wei Mengru came to Lianji Peak and met the sect master in a quiet courtyard at the back of Lianji Peak. Her body was filled with black mist as always. She was wearing a raven black dress that set off her beautiful figure. A pair of round and tight snow-white legs were outlined under the skirt. She was sitting casually under the pavilion with her legs slightly tilted. There are several leaders of the main peaks under the pavilion, and they seem to be discussing something. What's the matter with you? At this time, concubine Shangyan's voice came from the pavilion, and the leaders present looked at her. After seeing Musian, everyone had some emotion in their eyes. Sensing the gazes of several people, Musian immediately raised his hands and bowed respectfully, saying, Disciple has met the sect master and several of the leaders. Yi Hao, the head of Canghai Peak, saw this and immediately said with a smile, Fellow Daoist Mu, you don't have to be so polite. Your current realm is similar to ours, and you don't have to call yourself a disciple anymore. Musian heard this and immediately shook his head solemnly, once a teacher, always a father. The heads have given me a new life. No matter what realm I am in, I can't forget the kindness in the past. Besides, my Linger almost ate all the 8 treasure cranes in Canghai Peak, it's not too much to call him head or senior. Musian quickly gathered his thoughts and said respectfully, Disciple is here to thank the sect master. If it weren't for concubine Shangyan blocking the secrets of heaven, once the Lord of Reincarnation asked the heavenly Dao to come at that time, no one knows what will happen. The heads naturally didn't know what happened in the Dogon dynasty before this. They looked at each other and saw doubts in each other's eyes. Let's stop here today. You all go back first, concubine Shangyan said in a calm tone. Then, she looked up at Wei Mengru and smiled, you should go back first. Wei Mengru looked at the pair of beautiful golden eyes and frowned slightly. For some reason, she always felt a sense of inexplicable familiarity. It was as if she had seen her somewhere before. But since the sect master had said so, she couldn't stay here any longer. She could only look at the young master and then temporarily left the courtyard with the other chiefs. After only 2 people were left, Musian was not as reserved as before and sat down next to the sect master's sister. What was the sect master talking about with the chiefs just now? I just taught them the 9 peaks technique after enlightenment. Shang Yanfei opened her red lips slightly, glanced at the young man lazily, and said softly, "Aren't you worried that Mu Lian would see the scene if she came?" "I could have noticed it before my senior sister came, sect master." "Don't worry." Muzian laughed and took the sect master's slightly cold little hand. Although Muzian still felt an inexplicable distance between himself and the sect master, he was still quite happy to be intimate with this mysterious elder sister. But as soon as he held her hand, Muzian seemed to have noticed something and subconsciously glanced at her. "Are you injured?" He couldn't notice it when he kept a distance from her, but after getting close to Shang Yanfei, Muzian clearly felt that her breath was a little weaker than before. "Is it because of blocking the secrets of heaven?" Shang Yanfei chuckled, her voice as pleasant as usual. "If you have to say it, it's true. After all, I'm only in the Hedeo realm. It takes a little price to block the secrets of heaven." "You shouldn't be injured this time, right?" she asked casually, lightly changing the subject. Muzian shook his head. With Miss Tiandeo around, he couldn't be injured. What Muzian didn't expect was that even the leader would get hurt when shielding the secrets of heaven. Shang Yanfei stared quietly with her beautiful eyes, revealing a quiet and elegant smile. "It's good that you're not hurt." The beautiful eyes were as calm as usual, but for some reason, when Muzian stared at them, he always saw an indescribable tenderness in her eyes. Just like the look Mu Wanji had given him before. Muzian had no choice but to divert Shang Yanfei's attention and said, "The way of heaven has not come yet. Is it you who did it in secret?" "I'm not an immortal. One person can't shield the secrets of heaven and prevent the way of heaven from coming." Shang Yanfei said softly, "I just used the formation in the 9 peaks to do some tricks." Then, she said again, "However, as long as the Forbidden Land is still there, they will find ways to invite the way of heaven to come again." Muzian heard the subtext of Shang Yanfei's words, glanced at her, and said, "Sister leader means, get rid of it first, the Lord of Taboos." "The Lord of Taboos cannot be dealt with. As long as the Forbidden Land is not destroyed, it will be difficult for the Lord of Taboos to die." The elegant and mysterious beauty glanced at him, and the handsome face of the young man was reflected in her pale golden eyes. "The 9 Forbidden Lands are not a monolithic entity. At least now the Dongzhou Forbidden Area and the Life Forbidden Area have been out of the control of the heaven in a sense." Muzian's eyes moved slightly, and he hesitated. "Sister sect master means? Have you heard of the story of the fox demon causing chaos in the dynasty?" Shang Yanfei asked a seemingly irrelevant question. Muzian nodded gently. "The fox demon seduced the emperor of the dynasty, and the king did not attend the court early from then on." He had read a lot of similar stories before. But why did the sect master mention this for no reason? Muzian's thoughts were interrupted for a moment, and he looked at Shang Yanfei in shock, with an expression that sister sect master will not be as cuckolded as Qian'er. Shang Yanfei picked up the teacup and took a sip, which made her red lips more moisturized. Then, he looked at Muzian with a smile in his eyes. "Compared to completely destroying the Forbidden Land, I think you should have a more appropriate method, right?" So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 603. Do I have a better way to solve the Forbidden Land? When Muzian heard this, his first reaction was doubt. Then after seeing the joking look in concubine Shang Yan's eyes, he immediately reacted and said seriously, "Sister sect leader, I am not the kind of person who takes things lightly. People, if you want to solve the forbidden area, the best way is to divorce. If I have to say it, it should be a honey trap." Among the 9 taboo places today, more than 4 taboo places have thoughts about Muzian. If it were known that Muzian had chosen one of the taboo places, the other taboo lords would be anxious. After all, except for the forbidden area where Yelingxian is located, the other forbidden places are all similar in strength, and the addition of Muzian is enough to change the current situation. This is something that even the Lord of Taboo doesn't want to see. In the final analysis, there are only two reasons why the Lord of Taboos would want heaven to come. One is to hope that Tiandeo can reshuffle the cards and reset everything, so that the strength of the major forces can return to the starting line. And the other one is for Musian. What if Musian took the initiative to surrender to a forbidden place? Or choose two of the forbidden places and surrender? I think they would be happy to see it. Concubine Shangyan did not persuade Musian, but just looked at him quietly. After a while, she couldn't help but chuckle. Just a joke. She withdrew her gaze, raised her head to look at the vast snow outside the courtyard, and said softly, "The clones sent by the Lord of Taboo all died in the Dakian dynasty, but their bodies failed to inherit the memories of the clones. This will inevitably cause them of alertness. If you actively choose to join a forbidden place at this time, it will only make the other party doubt your motives." Musian looked at concubine Shangyan's profile. Among the fish he knew in the fish pond, concubine Shangyan was the one he couldn't understand the most. You had no idea what she was thinking or what she wanted to do. He could sense before that the sect leader was seriously considering whether to dismantle the taboo place from within, but now she denied his previous thoughts. "Is the Lord of Taboo really difficult to deal with?" Musian suddenly asked. "It's hard." Concubine Shangyan stood up and stretched her waist lazily, vaguely revealing a small section of her slim waist under her black attire. "In this world, rules are everything. The taboo lords who are in taboo places have the authority to rewrite the rules. If they rewrite the rules so that they are immortal, it will be difficult for them to die." She said calmly, "You should know all these things, right? Why are you still asking this kind of question now?" "I always feel like I was despised by her just now," Musian said. "Can't I block the rules?" "What you can block are the rules between heaven and earth, but the taboo rules are not included in the rules of heaven and earth. They are the rules set by heaven itself." Concubine Shangyan said calmly, "So as long as the forbidden place remains, it will be difficult to kill the Lord of the forbidden place." After finishing speaking, she looked at Musian unexpectedly and said with a smile, "I have never thought about destroying the Forbidden Land. Have you already had similar thoughts?" "That's not true, I'm just a little curious." Musian paused for a moment. "Can't even the sect master do it?" At this time, concubine Shangyan was a little distracted. Her thoughts seemed to be immersed in certain scenes in the past, and it was not until a while later that she woke up from her thoughts and stared into his eyes. "Why do you think I can do it?" Musian thought for a while and smiled. "Maybe it's because I can't imagine you failing." For a moment, concubine Shangyan's eyes seemed to show a complex color that she had never seen before. She raised her head and looked at the vast snow outside the courtyard, and said softly, "I am not invincible. Even I can't stay by your side sometimes." She said calmly, "You now have powerful Taoist companions around you to protect you. The Queen of the Demon Realm, Gong Lianyu, and King Di are all higher than me. Compared with them, the only thing I can help you is I will always open the door of Lianji sect to you, that's all. After all, I can't leave the sect even half a step." Yes, your true body cannot leave the sect even half a step, but what about the clone?" Musian was calm on the surface, but deep down he couldn't help complaining. Mu Wanwan and Mu Wanj are both avatars of concubine Shangyan, and they have been preparing certain plans for the future a long time ago, but now the sect leader says that she cannot leave the sect for even half a step. Even so, that's true, but it's not entirely accurate either. After all, isn't the clone a part of herself? When Musian thought of this, he suddenly thought of another very interesting thing. Mu Wanj and Mu Wanwan both have their own spiritual consciousness, and each spiritual consciousness has a completely different personality. Are their different personalities also part of the sect master's personality? One Mu Wanwan wants to be his girlfriend, while the other Mu Wanj treats him a bit like a child. Then what feelings does the sect leader have towards him? "Sister sect leader, is there anything you need me to do?" Musian asked. "In any case, it was for him that the sect master shielded the secrets of heaven to prevent the coming of heaven. If possible, he also wanted to do something for concubine Shang Yan. It's just a little backlash, nothing. Concubine Shang Yan thought for a while, looked at Musian up and down, and chuckled, but since you said so, if you think about it carefully, it seems that I really need you to do something. Shielding the heavens will affect your own luck. The more causes and effects involved, the greater the backlash of your luck will be. If I remember correctly, there should be some luck from heaven remaining in your body, right? Musian seemed to have thought of something and said, are you referring to the destiny given by heaven to the chosen ones? As expected, the elder sister of the sect master knew that Yu and others were related to the way of heaven. Musian asked, the sect master also needs complete luck of the way of heaven. He had previously transferred the destiny of heaven to Wei Mengru, letting her use it to suppress the bad luck in her body, but he did not expect that even the sect master would need it. The backlash from my luck is not too great. Giving me complete luck from heaven is just a waste, partial luck from heaven is enough. The beauty in gorgeous clothes under the courtyard has a charming and cold voice. She stares at the lonely snowy scene outside the courtyard. The slender back seemed to blend perfectly with the snowy scene. Musian looked at the stunning beauty so close at hand and was lost in thought for a while. Then he came to his senses and said, but if you have complete luck, the help to you will be great. Is it bigger? The little luck in my body right now may not be of much help. It doesn't matter whether it can be of great help. As for the complete destiny of heaven, it should be left to those who need it more. Concubine Shang Yan tilted her head slightly and looked at the boy with a smile, and said softly, you have experienced so much and had intimate contact with so many women, but sometimes your reactions are still very slow. Musian was startled and stared quietly at the pale golden eyes of the gorgeously dressed beauty. He seemed to see a gentle luster in her eyes. What I need is not your remaining luck. She took half a step forward and pressed her fingertips to Musian's lips before he could speak. The best healing medicine in the world is not some natural treasure, but love. She lowered her head and kissed the boy gently on the lips. Half an hour later, Musian first went to see his senior sister and sister Feiying, and then left Lianji Peak leisurely. However, as soon as he flew out of Lianji Peak, he saw the maid in yellow skirt holding an umbrella and waiting quietly nearby. In the heavy snow, she held an oil paper umbrella, and her goose yellow dress flew back, highlighting her bulging figure. Sister Mengru, why didn't you go back first? Musian stepped forward to the maid's side and carefully swept away the snowflakes from her hair. There's nothing to do after we go back anyway, so why not see how long you plan to stay in Lianji Peak? Wei Mengru said, stepped forward and sniffed slightly, then glanced at the young man faintly. A feminine scent. I don't know whether it belongs to Lan Mulian or concubine Shang Yan. Being looked up and down by Wei Mengru's faint eyes, she felt like she had been seen through instantly. Musian coughed lightly, tried his best to stay calm, and said, let's go. If it snows this much, you can go back first. You don't have to wait for me. It's really suspicious. The maid who has been following the young master naturally saw that the master obviously wanted to change the subject at this moment. However, she did not continue to ask any more questions. Instead, she hummed softly, then held an umbrella and he walked together on the road back to Tianhe Garden. As a maid, she has no right to ask what her master is doing. Of course Wei Mengru would not ask these things in most cases. It's just that sometimes when she sees him with other women, she feels very uncomfortable. Especially recently, whenever she thought that there were not only other women around him, but also a maid called Miss Tiandeo, Wei Mengru felt a sense of crisis in her heart. Today, such a sense of crisis even gave her some dangerous ideas. Few disciples passed by near Lianji Peak. In the vast snowy sky, it seemed that only the master and the subordinate were left in the entire sect. Now that I think about it, there seems to have been a similar scene before. When I was in Tianqian City, I came out of the inn, and then I went home with you in a carriage or under an umbrella, Musian suddenly said with emotion. Wei Mengru gave a soft hum, looked up at the snowy sky, and said softly, at that time, there was no one else around you, and I was the only one you could rely on. But it's different now. I'm not the only one around you, and you don't need to rely on me anymore. Thinking about it carefully, did I miss the best opportunity to attack the young master? When he was in Tianqian City, the girl Musian met was pretty good looking, but she was still far inferior to the cold and charming maid. At that time, the young master had a crush on her. If you want to do something at that time, no one will stop you in every possible way. When Wei Mengru thought of this, her chest felt a little stuffy, as if there was some emotion stuck there. But at this moment, a voice suddenly came from the bottom of her heart again. The voice seemed to be full of infinite temptation, gently echoing in her ears, if you regret it so much, then come to me, I will let you all your wishes come true. Wei Mengru's eyes were slightly dazed, and she pressed her forehead tightly. Everything in front of her eyes seemed to be spinning. Sister Mengru, Sister Mengru. Faintly hearing the young man's concerned voice, Wei Mengru reluctantly came back to reality from the trance she had just been in. She raised her head suddenly and stared at the handsome face in front of her. Her beautiful eyes were slightly in a trance, and she gently raised her hand to touch his face. Musian was stunned for a moment, then hesitantly looked at the maid in the yellow skirt in front of him. Are you okay? She was obviously sulking not long ago, but now her attitude suddenly changed 180 degrees, which was really strange. She's fine. It's just that the evil spirit consciousness is about to wake up at the end, so sometimes she can't control the desires deep in her heart. At this moment, a sickly and sweet voice sounded, and without Musian noticing, everything around him seemed to turn grey in an instant. The snow scene was grey, the floor was grey, and even the disciples passing by turned grey. Snowflakes froze in the air, and the cold wind also stopped. Musian subconsciously turned his head to look in the direction of the opening, and saw a woman coming into view, wearing a gorgeous black gauze dress, with a vaguely snow-white complexion, and a pair of white jade feet peeking out from under the skirt. Her body proportions were as perfect as if they didn't exist in the world, and those silver-white eyes were enough to make men who saw her go crazy, and even fall under her pomegranate skirt uncontrollably. The original witch. Musian said subconsciously. What did you mean by what you just said? The woman in the black dress raised her charming eyes and smiled. Literally, I have 3 spiritual consciousnesses. Now the last spiritual consciousness can hardly suppress the arrow of heaven, so I have no choice but to wake up from my deep sleep. Are you the last original witch's spiritual consciousness deep in the wilderness? Musian said subconsciously. What will happen after she wakes up? Nothing will happen, it will just affect the main body to a greater or lesser extent. After all, I is not as easy to talk to as the main body. If I represent love and desire, then what she wants to symbolize is evil, right? You mean the evil witch will also return to Sister Mengru's body? Musian asked subconsciously. This will happen sooner or later, but you don't have to worry too much. The evil personality will only affect the body for a period of time when it returns, and it will only have a little impact. After that, it will recover, the original witch said. Musian looked thoughtful. So, after the return of the 3 spiritual consciousnesses, Sister Mengru's strength will reach its peak. The original witch looked at him with a smile and said nothing. You'd better not do anything that irritates me too much during this period, otherwise it will speed up the return of the evil personality. Believe me, you don't want to see her. After a final gentle reminder, the figure of the original witch disappeared between heaven and earth. The snowflakes fell again and the cold wind howled by. Wei Mengru suddenly came back to her senses and noticed that the young man beside her was looking at her with concern. She couldn't help but ask, "What's wrong? Suddenly he keeps staring at me." Musian looked at the tall beauty in front of him, and recalled what the desire witch had just said, and couldn't help but laugh. So has Sister Mengru been jealous before? Wei Mengru frowned. What nonsense are you talking about all of a sudden? Inexplicably. Just as she thought of this, Musian suddenly reached out and hugged her waist, pulling the maid's soft body into his arms. She wanted to scold her, but under the young master's gaze, she couldn't help but panic in her heart. She lowered her head subconsciously, her delicate and cold pretty face blushed, and whispered, "You, what did you do suddenly? Don't you just want to hug my sister Mengru?" This time, the maid didn't say anything anymore, but quietly closed her eyes. The umbrella in her hand fell off to the ground at some point. She let the snowflakes fall on her body. After hesitating for a moment, she still hugged her little hands tightly. Musian's back. After a long time, Musian let go of Wei Mengru, held her soft hand, and said with a smile, "Go back first." As if aware of the eagerness in the young master's eyes, Wei Mengru subconsciously grasped the hem of her skirt until she slowly let go. The corners of her mouth raised inadvertently, and the depression she felt during this period seemed to gradually melt away in this warmth, so that her steps became a little brisker. Such a pleasant day. With some emotion in his heart, Musian held the hand of the maid and returned to Tianhe Garden. Then he looked at Wei Mengru beside him and soon fell into deep thought. "What's wrong, are you worried?" Wei Mengru raised her eyes and glanced at the young master. "It's not that I'm worried, it's just that I suddenly thought that I seemed to have a wish before and it hasn't come true yet. I wonder if you can do me a favor?" Musian said, looking at the maid's beautiful figure intentionally or unintentionally. "Desire?" Wei Mengru stared at the young master suspiciously. "You tell me first." You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 604. Under the heavy snowfall, the entire sec seemed to be turned into a silvery white color, and Tianhe Garden was also covered with snow. Looking at Wei Mengru's suspicious eyes, Musian did not speak directly, but said casually, "The weather has turned cold recently, Sister Mengru should also pay attention to keeping warm. I would feel bad if I got frostbite." Wei Mengru glanced at the young master faintly, rubbed her arm with disgust, and said coldly, "If you have anything to say, just say it, it's so disgusting that it almost makes people's skin crawl." "Musian, I only care about you out of good intentions. Isn't it too sad to say this?" When he said this, he rummaged through the ring, then took out a beautifully crafted jade box and handed it to Wei Mengru. The maid glanced at the young master, then opened the jade box and took a look. What appeared in her field of vision was a pair of white silk stockings that looked quite transparent and smooth, and seemed to exude a faint brilliance. "This is Nirvana silk. I asked someone to help me make it before. I thought you would be able to use it in winter," Musian said with a smile. Wei Mengru rolled her eyes and said calmly, "Thank you, but I don't need it. Monks don't feel much about seasonal changes, and naturally they don't feel cold or hot." Musian sighed softly and looked at her tentatively. "Sister Mengru, you should know what I mean, right?" Wei Mengru tilted her head slightly, with a hint of disdain in her eyes, and pretended to be puzzled. "Aren't you worried that I would catch a cold and gave you this gift?" There was a hint of ridicule in his tone. How could she not know what the young master was thinking? "Just like before, I just want her to wear these kind of see-through stockings to be eye-catching." "Oh no, maybe it's not just for the eyes, but maybe he also wants her to serve tea and pour water like this and do things that a maid should do." In fact, Wei Mengru was more like a personal bodyguard than a maid. She never did such trivial matters as serving tea and water, and was only responsible for the young master's daily safety. But occasionally, Musian also wanted to play a childhood game with her. Seeing Wei Mengru's refusal, Musian had no choice but to quietly put away the jade box. In that case, forget it, he sighed. Something is wrong. In the past, if she had refused, the young master would have begged her again no matter what, but today he just gave up. The maid had some doubts in her heart and couldn't help but look at Musian more secretly. Since Sister Mengru refuses to agree, we can only wait until we get back and ask Miss Tiandeo what she means. However, after hearing what Musian added again, Wei Mengru froze on the spot and stared at Musian's back without saying a word. I seemed to be jumping sideways repeatedly at the door of the small dark room. Musian noticed the chill coming from behind, calmed his mind slightly, and then smiled. It's just a joke, even if the will of heaven is willing, I can't do this, because this is my gift to you. Wei Mengru curled her lips. I have heard this kind of words to make girls happy from you countless times before, and each time it was a different girl. Musian stepped forward and held her soft little hand, and said seriously, I'm not trying to make you happy, I'm just telling the truth. If I really wanted to give it to someone else, how could this thing still be in my ring now? Of all the girls I know, you are the most suitable for this gift. Musian was not lying. In his fish pond, Wei Mengru's legs were the most plump and well proportioned. A girl like her was more suitable for such a gift. Of course, it is not easy to say that you want the maid to dress more eye-catchingly and to be so elegant and refined. Wei Mengru sneered, the most suitable for me? You have said this to many girls countless times before. Don't forget, when you were in contact with other women outside, I was always watching. After replying so disdainfully, she pursed her pretty red lips, suppressing her happy mood and the corners of her mouth that couldn't help but want to raise. Perfect for this gift. Even though I know it's flattery, why do I feel so happy just by being praised? Wei Mengru managed to calm down, trying her best not to let the young master notice her strangeness, and stretched out her hand towards him. Are you willing to accept it? Musian asked with some surprise. Wei Mengru said reservedly. Can I change it today? Musian asked again. Why is this person pushing the envelope? Wei Mengru glanced sideways. If you beg me, I can't think about it. Musian, please. Wei Mengru. After a brief silence, Wei Mengru couldn't help but roll her eyes. After once again showing disdain for the young master's shamelessness, she hesitated for a moment and finally nodded lightly. Anyway, Ling Long is still in seclusion now, and there is no one else in Tianhe Garden except her and Musian. No one will see her even if she is dressed, but it won't be too shameful. Just when I thought of this, I heard someone's even more demanding request. Then after you put it on, can you look at me with disgust and at my request? He leaned over and whispered something into the maid's ear. Wei Mengru lowered her head, her soft forehead hair hanging down, covering her slightly red face. She gently pinched the hem of her skirt with both hands and whispered, is this the role-playing you mentioned before? Musian had told her a little story before, which was basically about a maid who hated her master at first, but in the end had to obey because the other party was the master, so she did a lot of socially deadly things under the master's orders. Similar stories. No, this is not called role-playing. Musian's right hand intentionally or unintentionally hugged Wei Mengru's soft waist, and said seriously, we should call this a practical exercise. In the depths of the forbidden land of life, a girl with slightly pale skin suddenly opened her eyes. Almost at the moment she opened her eyes, the whole palace seemed to be shaking violently, and it also showed the endless anger of its master. Master Zixian. Mu Ji called out the name word by word, and the beautiful eyes that were always calm in the past were now full of anger. For 3 whole days. Her clone was trapped by the 3 women around Musian for 3 days, and during those 3 days she could only watch her fiancé do things he didn't like under coercion. Well, at least from Mu Ji's perspective, Musian was forced. This was the greatest shame that Muji had ever experienced since she inherited the forbidden land of life, and it was also a black history that she planned to completely seal from now on. "Master, are you okay?" In the depths of this gloomy palace, an old man who looked thin and leaned on a cane asked respectfully. "What happened in the Dogon dynasty those days?" he asked again. "It has been nearly a week since the masters of the major taboos went to the Dogon dynasty. About 4 days ago, the clones of the masters of the major taboos were broken one after another. The Forbidden Land seemed to be sending people to investigate something, but the master of the Forbidden Land of Life had not returned yet, so the old man guessed that the things being investigated in the Forbidden Land might be related to the master. It's not a big deal, it's just that the clones of those idiots all died in the Dogon dynasty." Muji gradually calmed down and narrowed her eyes. There was a thoughtful luster in her clear and beautiful eyes, but the Forbidden Land will not give up. At least Isis has been frustrated twice in the demon world. I'm afraid she will be completely unable to sit still. The immortal Forbidden Land may not be as strong as the demon world in terms of comprehensive strength, but the strength of the top monks is not much different. If the immortal Forbidden Land really takes action, then other Forbidden Lands will probably have some movement. By then, the real turmoil will begin. And that is also the best time for her to take action. The best time to take action and take away the big brother. Although Muji was going to let him go at first, but after seeing all the scenes in the past few days, the Lord of Life has completely given up this idea. Keep an eye on the immortal Forbidden Land during this period. If nothing unexpected happens, there will be movement there soon, Muji whispered. "Yes, Master," the old man bowed very gracefully. At this time, a servant of the Forbidden Land said with a tone of admiration, "You are worthy of being the master." All the taboo masters who went to the Dogon dynasty died in it without exception. Only the master returned to the Forbidden Land of Life safely. This sounded like admiration, but it was extremely harsh to Muji. Thinking of the various scenes of the Demon Queen and others and Muzian in those days, Muji lowered his eyes slightly and tapped the throne inlaid with skulls with his fingertips. Then he looked at the servant coldly. "You don't have to come to the imperial court from tomorrow. Go to the center of the Forbidden Land to take care of the ancient tree of life for 3 years." The servant was stunned for a moment, and subconsciously said, "Master, what did I do wrong? The formations in this palace are complicated. If you take a wrong step, it will affect the formation structure. You entered the palace with your left foot first today, which has affected the rules and order of the Forbidden Land of Life," Muji said lightly. Anyone would know that this was just an excuse to fire him, but no one in the Forbidden Land of Life dared to say anything at this time. "What's wrong? Do you think 3 years is not enough and want to hone your skills for a while longer?" Muji looked down at him from above, with a sickly smile on her pale face, and even her eyes seemed to be dark. The servant felt miserable, but he could only raise his hands and bow, saying respectfully, "I will obey your orders." Muzian raised his hands and stretched his waist lazily, took a look at the clothes hanging on the hanger, then opened the window and looked at the snow outside, enjoying this rare comfort. "It always feels like I'm back in Tianqian City." With some emotion, Muzian turned his head and looked at Wei Mengru, who was still curled up in the quilt. Her hair was a little messy and fell on her beautiful face. She glanced at the young master and said, "You didn't even dare to touch my hand at that time." Muzian said speechlessly, "Is it because I didn't want to touch it? You kicked me out before I even touched it? Which other young master in Tianqian City is so frustrated that he can't even order his own maid? Muzian is the only one. But it's also because Wei Mengru is too powerful and relatively cold. If it were other maids in the Mu mansion, how could they refuse Muzian's order? If I remember correctly, some maids would even be punished with sticks if they disobeyed their master's orders. It seems that I am still a very gentle person," Muzian said with some sigh. "In this era, human life is worth nothing, not to mention that most of the maids and attendants are slaves who were displaced due to the war and were taken in by the people in the house. If you don't obey your master's orders, no one will know even if you die. Don't you want to be educated with sticks? Wei Mengru cast a disdainful glance at the young master. You clearly don't have the strength to educate me. At that time, Musian was still in the Qi training stage, but Wei Mengru had already refined Qi to become a god. Even 100 Musian combined could not be a match for the maid. Musian chuckled, "It's not easy to teach you with a stick now." Wei Mengru gave the young master a faint look, then glanced at the letter paper that had just flown from a distant direction outside the window, and said thoughtfully, "Looking at the mark on this letter paper, it seems that it was sent from the Dacian dynasty." Musian took the letter and glanced at it, then put it on the desk. "It should be an invitation letter from Yongning." Wei Mengru, "Why don't you open it first and take a look?" It was obvious that Wei Mengru's previous happy mood seemed to have dissipated a bit. Musian shook his head gently, "Don't be in a hurry. It's okay to watch it later." At the end of the sentence, he stared at Wei Mengru's moist and beautiful eyes that still had lingering charm, and said softly, "Now is my time with Sister Mengru." Wei Mengru was suddenly stunned by the sudden confession from the young master. Then, under those gentle eyes, she grabbed the sheet to cover her face. It wasn't until a little while later that she poked out a pair of eyes and looked at him shyly. "You, come here for a moment." Musian hesitated for a moment, but still walked to the bed and sat down. "You just said that it's easy for you to educate me now, right?" As soon as Wei Mengru said something, Musian couldn't help but be stunned for a moment, thinking to herself, "I was just joking, why did Sister Mengru take it seriously?" Nowadays, Wei Mengru has the spiritual blessings of 2 original witches. Let alone Musian, who is in the Enlightenment realm. Even if he is in the Hedeo realm, it is difficult to educate this maid. More or less. She wanted to think about it, but Musian still nodded slightly and said half-jokingly, "Why, does Sister Mengru want to be educated by me again?" "Yes." The unexpected answer stunned Musian for a moment. At this time, Wei Mengru took out a pair of small and exquisite white jade hands from the quilt, gently hooked the young man's neck, and whispered, "Since you think you can do it, how about you let me see it, master?" Just as Muji expected, almost that night, there was a terrifying sense of pressure in the immortal Forbidden Land, and the taboo rules of the immortal Forbidden Land turned into grey mist and silently spread outward. Although the clone's memory was not inherited to the main body, the owner of the immortal Forbidden Land knew through investigation that her clone would die in the Dacian dynasty and was also involved with the Queen of the Demon Realm. This is already a provocation, and it is a provocation again and again. It is precisely because of this that Isis allowed the taboo rules to invade the realm of the demon world that night. That night, many demon cultivators saw the extremely mysterious grey mist floating out in the direction of the immortal Forbidden Land. Wherever the grey mist went, the flesh and blood of all living creatures disintegrated in an instant and turned into the immortal Forbidden Land of blood. But that night, a deafening dragon roar came from the sky above the immortal Forbidden Land. The sound was so loud that it seemed to tear the sky apart and forcefully push back the grey fog. There was a burst of cheers in the demon world. They all recognized that it was the ancient Emperor Longxiu who took action. Although the dispute between the immortal Forbidden Land and the demon realm has come to an end for the time being, it has still aroused discussions among many monks. However, things are currently peaceful in Dongzhou. Located in the capital city of Dacian dynasty, the streets are brightly lit. If you walk on the streets of Dacian capital these days, you can smell a faint fragrance of flowers. It was a spontaneous celebration held by the people to celebrate the new emperor's accession to the throne. Dacian's successor is naturally Princess Yongning, who is rumored to be supported by the 3 ancient forces. On the day of his succession to the throne, Yongning personally held a banquet in the palace of the Dacian dynasty to celebrate with the ministers, and then the next day he invited a few people to have a drink and chat privately. Among them were Bairu Oxi, Yao Yu, and even Ye Lingxian and others. But after seeing how many people really agreed, Yongning was still a little surprised. She thought that these people would be difficult to invite, but she didn't expect that they agreed so easily. At this moment, in the hall of Yongning Palace, maids were bringing fine wine one after another. Ya Lingxian picked up the wine glass, took a sip of the wine, glanced expressionlessly at Fairy Kinkin sitting not far to the left, and then showed a friendly smile. "Why is Sister Kingdi here?" "Sister?" Ye Qian seemed to be afraid that her sister would conflict with her master here, so she reached out and gently tugged at the corner of her clothes. Yao Meng smiled and said, "The new emperor of Daqian has succeeded to the throne. Since he has invited the restricted area, naturally Feng Yaokai will not be an exception. Is there anything strange about me coming here?" Bai Ruoxi said softly, "After Sister Lingxian inherited the position of the master of the restricted area, she should be busy with a lot of things every day. Doesn't it matter if she just leaves the restricted area like this?" Ya Lingxian heard this, and a little more uncomfortable expression appeared on her pretty face. She said calmly, "The reincarnated queen is here, she will help to deal with it, so there is no big problem. But Sister Ruoxi, I heard that the Sword Palace has been restarted now. Is it really okay if you are not in the Sword Palace?" Ya Lingxian asked. "There are several elders in the Sword Palace that I sealed in the formation in the past. In fact, I don't need to do much." When Bai Ruoxi said this, a pair of gentle eyes looked around at the people present. Almost everyone was very beautiful. Among them, she also saw Lin Qiu, Musian's master Yan Ruyu and others. In addition, there was Lan Mulian who was sitting quietly in the corner. Two of the three beauties in Tianqian City are now in this hall, right? Ye Qian looked at the scene and couldn't help thinking in her heart. Ya Lingxian and Bai Ruoxi were very popular in Tianqian City. In addition, there is Huang Manting, the witch from Chenexai Chamber of Commerce. I don't know where the witch has gone these days, and she seems to have not been seen in the section. Just thinking of this, Ye Qian suddenly noticed a pair of eyes looking at her, and couldn't help but look up and ask, "Your Majesty, what's the matter?" Yongning shook his head gently and said with a smile, "Nothing, I just think you all seem to have a really good relationship. He is really worthy of being Master Mu. Any one of them is a beautiful girl who is admired by countless people in Dongzhou. Such a woman is naturally arrogant. I didn't expect that he could make them live in harmony. If you just look at the surface, the scene in front of you is indeed very harmonious, but Yongning obviously didn't expect that these people have fought privately for countless times in the past. You said earlier that someone hasn't arrived yet. Is he delayed by something?" At this time, Ye Qingxin, who was dressed in a black and red dress and looked charming, suddenly asked with a smile, with a soft look between her eyebrows. When a great man spoke, Yongning naturally did not dare to neglect him and said, in reply to the senior, "The letter I sent out has been delivered to Lianji sect not long ago. I think he should come soon after receiving it." Ye Qingxin's face showed a thoughtful look. The people Yongning invited privately this time were all the major forces that supported her behind the scenes. These major forces did not openly support her, and even did not show up at all, but just this alone, she had won the final throne. The reason why Yongning can succeed to the throne today is that on the one hand, the various forces do not want the Dagon dynasty to be destroyed and affect the fortune of Dongzhou, so a wise monarch is needed, and on the other hand, someone is behind the scenes to lead all this. The role played by that person in this situation can be said to be crucial. At least in Zhuzhou at present, no one can make the three forces reach a consensus. I didn't expect that Princess Yongning would succeed to the throne smoothly in the end. Congratulations. At this moment, a gentle and clear laughter suddenly came from outside the hall. Musian, who was carrying gifts into the palace and preparing to enjoy a candlelight dinner with the Empress, walked into the hall under the guidance of a maid, breaking the delicate atmosphere of the crowd just now. Before coming, Musian could be said to be looking forward to this banquet. After all, his relationship with Yongning was ambiguous, and these 2 days were a good day for her to succeed to the throne. Maybe tonight will have a good development, Musian originally thought so. However, when he stepped into the hall and looked at the scene in the hall, Musian's body couldn't help but stiffen slightly. He suddenly realized that it seemed that he couldn't eat this meal with peace of mind. So, they were the protagonists all along. Author, CCC. Chapter 605. Am I here too early? The moment Musian stepped into the hall, the smile on his face could not be suppressed. It stands to reason that the Empress invited him, and the relationship between the two was quite ambiguous, so it would not be surprising if something happened next. Musian originally thought that he should have a very pleasant candlelight dinner time. Maybe he would stay overnight in the palace at night. However, after seeing the few people in the hall, Musian no longer thought about enjoying a pleasant candlelight dinner. He just wanted to escape from this place as soon as possible. Although he had known that Yongning would invite people from Yaokai and other places to express his gratitude this time, he also expected that Yaokai, the Forbidden Area and the Sword Palace might agree, and then send people to the Dogon dynasty. But he did not expect that these three forces did not send anyone, but came to the Dogon dynasty in person. Didn't Sister Lingxian just inherit the Forbidden Area not long ago? Shouldn't she be very busy? Why did she have the leisure to come to the palace as a guest and chat? Besides, isn't Ruoxi always not interested in such superficial banquets? The little soul in Musian's body was roaring, and at this time, the maid behind him took the young master's arm very considerately, walked to the empty seat opposite Yongning under the eyes of everyone, and pulled out a chair for him very considerately. Young master has been overworked these 2 days, and just rushed all the way to the Dogon dynasty. You should sit down and rest quickly, Wei Mengru said in a very concerned tone. Overworked? As soon as this word came out, it immediately attracted the attention of several people. Yao Meng propped up her chin and looked at the young man with a smile. I know that my husband has been overworked a few days ago. Did something happen again these 2 days? Why is he overworked again? It is obviously a very normal word, but when it comes out of the mouth of this fairy, it feels a bit different. On the surface, this word seems to be concerned about the husband, but in fact it is also a response to Wei Mengru's previous words that seem to be showing off. So what if you let him work too hard these 2 days? I had already eaten it up long before that. The little spiritual energy he had left was not even a dreg. You were just eating the leftovers at most. There was something like this in the words. Ruoxi slightly closed her legs, put her hands on her shoulders, and her long hair like a waterfall fell naturally, looking like a quiet lady. But her eyes that glanced at the boy from time to time revealed a little shyness. The smart Miss Bai did not choose to participate in this battle. After all, she had enjoyed Mulang not only with King Di, but also with Wei Mengru. In a sense, Miss Bai now has no so-called rival in love. Anyway, everyone would bring her to various banquets. In a sense, Miss Bai also got the most natural furnace and cauldron spiritual energy. Only Ye Lingxian, who was still in the dark, glanced at the people present with a suspicious look, and then looked at Wei Mengru for a few more times. Seeing her holding Brother Mu's arm intimately, the girl's eyebrows could not help but frown. Although she had known the relationship between Wei Mengru and Musian for a long time, she was still very unhappy when she really saw this scene, not to mention that the other party's words just now seemed to have a certain taste of showing off. But it was really strange. You know, Wei Mengru in the past was quite low-key and never clearly stated her relationship with Brother Mu. It seems that after integrating the two original witch spirits, her personality has been more or less affected. At this time, Yao Meng looked at Wei Mengru again, and then chuckled. Miss Wei seems to have never seen this skirt before, it seems to be newly bought. And this pair of white stockings, from the texture, it seems to be made of my Yaokai Nirvana silk. At this moment, Wei Mengru was wearing a pair of thin, translucent white stockings, which slightly revealed a little of her snow-white skin and also outlined a pair of slender legs to the fullest. In addition, the rather gorgeous light yellow dress almost perfectly showed the curvy and exquisite figure of the maid. And Yao Meng's words also attracted the attention of several people present. After taking a few glances, Yang Ning looked at Musian meaningfully and smiled. It seems to be Nirvana silk. No wonder it looks so silky and elastic. This kind of fabric is not something that anyone in the world can take out. I'm afraid only the Yaokai Holy Land can take out such precious fabrics. Nirvana silk is indeed something that only Yaokai can produce. It's not wrong to say that this thing is precious. Yao Meng paused slightly and said intentionally or unintentionally, but if I remember correctly, a lot of Nirvana silk fell into the hands of little friend Mu before, so it was given to others. The smile was gentle and charming, as if she was whispering like a big sister next door, but Musian felt a certain overflowing dangerous atmosphere from that smile. Most of the Nirvana silk is still in the ring, but I thought the weather is cold recently, so I prepared some warm clothes. Musian kept smiling, but anyone with a discerning eye could feel that the smile was about to break. He was still careless and didn't expect that Yang Ning would invite Yao Meng and others to attend the banquet. The most important thing is that they actually agreed. I never thought I would fall on Yang Ning, Musian sighed in his heart. Fortunately, Yang Ning seemed to see the subtle atmosphere, and calmly raised the wine glass and said, "No matter what, this time it is thanks to the help of you, otherwise it would be unrealistic to win the final throne. Here is a toast to everyone." Yang Ning reacted really quickly, Musian reacted immediately, also raised the wine glass, and said calmly, "In fact, this throne is also the popular choice. What we have done is actually very limited. Your Majesty does not need to be so humble." Musian was not being polite. Before this, people inside and outside the Dogon dynasty were in panic. A few days ago, another prince rebelled, which was known to everyone and made the court uneasy. Even if the last prince could win the throne, he would be criticized and it would be difficult to stabilize the foundation. In the final analysis, the purpose of the Forbidden Land from the beginning was not to maintain the stability of the Dogon dynasty, but to destroy the Dogon dynasty and then lead to the way of heaven. Therefore, for the several taboo masters, the more muddy the water, the better. However, they obviously did not expect that the will of heaven as the judge would be polluted by the spiritual energy of the natural furnace, and they also blew the black whistle. The prince and princess they secretly supported were also feared by the ministers because the matter was exposed. After all, the term Forbidden Land is a kind of fear for anyone in Zhuzhou. On the contrary, Yang Ning, who had been keeping a low profile, came to the end. At first, the ministers were worried that the new emperor would not be able to accomplish anything big, but as the memorials were reviewed in an orderly manner in the past 2 days, the ministers were relieved. Although natural disasters and man-made disasters have not yet stabilized, at least there are no more rumors about the decline of the Dogon dynasty. After a glass of wine, the somewhat dangerous atmosphere just now seemed to be slightly stabilized. Seeing that everyone seemed to no longer be entangled in the matter of Nirvana silk, Musian secretly breathed a sigh of relief. The temperament of women is really unpredictable. Musian took a sip of wine and sighed in his heart. According to his understanding of the maid, even if Wei Mengru received some things from him, she would never show off, and as for the intimate things between her and Musian, she would not put them on the table. However, from the current situation, Wei Mengru may be more or less affected by the original witch. Or in other words, that is her original character. Musian is naturally very relieved that Sister Mengru can be more cheerful. But at the same time, he is also a little worried. According to what the Witch of Love and Desire said before, each original witch's spiritual consciousness symbolizes different emotions of people. If the first witch's spiritual consciousness is a little sick and possessive, then the second original witch's spiritual consciousness represents love and desire. And the third spiritual consciousness sealed in the depths of the southern wilderness is evil. Warm tips: if you find that clicking the next page will force you to jump to other websites, please use the chapter report error or contact us at the bottom to inform us. We will handle it as soon as possible. Thank you for your understanding. What if Sister Mengru is really stimulated one day and the Witch of Evil returns? I don't know what will happen. Musian looked at Wei Mengru's flawless white face and couldn't help thinking secretly in his heart. Anyway, the dinner ended safely. After all, no matter how much they cared about Wei Mengru's previous overwork, it was impossible for everyone to ask about this in front of Yongning and others. If you don't mind, how about resting in the palace today? It's not convenient to go back so late, right? Yongning smiled and looked at the few people, but her beautiful eyes stayed on Musian for a moment. After ascending the throne, the former eldest daughter of the emperor dressed more maturely and luxuriously, with less girlishness, but more dignity and calmness. Musian naturally accepted Yongning's invitation. After all, he had been working hard day and night these days. Even if he was in the state of enlightenment, he couldn't stand such a torment. Of course, the bigger reason was that Musian also wanted to personally confirm how the situation would develop after the Dogon dynasty. Originally, according to Miss Tiandao's intention, the biggest reason why she came to Zhuzhou was to arrange the next successor dynasty. And now, this task has not been completed. Because the Dogon dynasty has not yet collapsed. And according to this trend, Musian really can't think of how this dynasty will collapse. Yao Meng and others came to the Dogon dynasty in person, probably because of this matter. But they didn't expect to run into Musian. After entering a guest room under the guidance of the maid, Musian was about to close the door. Stop. However, at this moment, someone covered his eyes from behind. Don't turn your head, just keep this posture. Hearing these words that seemed to carry a bit of threat, and noticing that a cold chain quietly swept out from his arm behind him, Musian could only honestly raise his hands and maintain the current action. The attacker was obviously quite satisfied with Musian's cooperation, and his voice became more joyful. What have you been doing all this time? Why haven't you contacted me? She raised her sword, and the golden chain of the wasteland silently returned to her sleeves. The girl walked in front of him with light steps. Musian looked at this slender and elegant little beauty silently, reached out and gently rubbed her hair, and said, "Not long ago, there was news that the Dacian dynasty was about to die. I think you should be in the restricted area. Have you heard about it too? So Brother Mu doesn't have time to pay attention to me because he wants to stabilize the Dacian dynasty." Ye Lingxian looked at him with a smile. She had obviously dressed up carefully before coming here. Her lips were painted with a layer of bright and attractive rouge. Her loose hair was pulled up with two white ribbons and combed into twin ponytails hanging on both sides. Her gorgeous purple eyes were filled with emotion. She has a cat-like luster, and the corners of her eyes are stained with a hint of crimson, making her look mature and attractive. It's not that I don't have time. Before meditating every day, I am thinking about Sister Lingxian. Musian smiled gently and skillfully wrapped his arms around the girl's slender waist. The faint fragrance of lavender, the soft body, and the sweet breath of the girl close at hand, all of which make people feel immersed in it. Under Musian's gaze, Ye Lingxian pursed her lips slightly, stepped closer to Musian on her small deerskin boots, put her small hands on his face, and said softly, "Brother Mu, isn't it because he is addicted to mature adults? Is it because my sister's body is so hard that she doesn't have time to care about Lingxian?" Musian was startled, then shook his head helplessly and said, "Sister Lingxian, who do you think I am dash?" Ye Lingxian put her small red lips to the young man's ear, as if she wanted to tell him a secret, and whispered softly, "In the restricted area, I can rewrite all the rules, and through the lock of desolate time, I can see all the time what you are doing is not going to be noticed by anyone. To put it more bluntly, in today's restricted area, Ye Lingxian is a god." Seeing the shocked look on Musian's face, I'm super smart and you can spy on me. The girl just pursed her lips and said with a smile, but don't worry, I've grown up now, and I won't be like before. So willful. And after meeting a girl, shouldn't you compliment her on her outfit first? Did I dress up specially to meet you tonight? Musian lowered his head and glanced at the small embroidered shoes under her gorgeous purple skirt and the white socks covering her tender white feet. He thought to himself that she seemed to have really matured a lot. She used to be only as tall as his shoulders. But now it was almost at the end of his nose. The physical development has also matured a lot, and the most important thing is that it has reached some size. Although compared to the girls in the fish pond, she was still inferior, but in Musian's opinion, Ye Lingxian was perfect as she was now. Musian was about to say something, but Ye Lingxian had already put her arms around his neck and kissed the boy gently on the lips. Don't worry, I've figured it out, so even if Brother Mu is with other girls, I won't care. But of course, when I'm jealous, I still need Brother Mu to compensate me. Before she finished speaking, Musian suddenly lowered his head and kissed her lips. Ye Lingxuan's heart beat faster and her eyes were slightly panicked. But slowly, her beautiful eyes gradually blurred, immersed in the joy of reunion and the warm embrace of the boy. Until a little while later, Ye Lingxian looked at the young man's handsome face infatuatedly, and as if he remembered something, he suddenly said, "By the way, Brother Mu, I remembered that in my first life, you asked me to wait for you all the time. Who is the woman?" Musian slowly opened his eyes and said via voice transmission, "Sect Master." "No." Musian was startled. Ye Lingxian said again, "I thought she was the sect leader at first, but my memory told me that I have never seen that woman before. In the past, she couldn't remember the woman's appearance because the secrets of Kyushu were blocked. But in today's Dongzhou restricted area, all the rules are controlled by Ye Lingxian, so he can naturally remember the past. If she is willing to set any rules in the restricted area, Musian will abide by them unconditionally. Even if you let him stay with you all the time." Coupled with the super long-distance tracking of enemies by the lock of desolate time, if Ye Lingxian wanted to do it, he could indeed do it. It's just that Ye Lingxian hasn't darkened to that level yet. Although she had indeed had such dangerous thoughts in her head before when she looked at her beloved brother Mu through the lock of desolation time. For example, by modifying the rules of the restricted area and turning Brother Mu into a velvet ball for her to play with. Musian naturally didn't know that he had walked into the small dark room unknowingly, and was still thinking about what Ye Lingxian had just said. He stared into Ye Lingxuan's eyes. "Can you describe that woman's appearance?" This chapter is from yesterday, there is another chapter today.